Good morning. Welcome to the January 7th, 2020 public hearing, public meeting of the New York City Landmarks Preservation Commission. I will call the roll. Chair Carroll?
Here.
Commissioner Bland? Here. Commissioner Barron?
Here.
Commissioner Jacob? Commissioner Chung? Here. Commissioner Devonshire? Commissioner Goldman? Commissioner Gustafson? Here. Commissioner Jefferson?
Here.
Commissioner Lefty? Commissioner Holtz?
Here.
Okay.
Okay, good morning, Commissioners, and Happy New Year. We're going to start today's Preservation Department agenda with a public meeting item. Item number 1, LPC 20-01991, an application for a certificate of appropriateness in the Borough of Brooklyn, Block 1227, Lot 67, 825 Prospect Place in Crown Heights, North Historic District. Colonial Revival style residence designed by Axel S. Edmond, built circa 1907. The application is to construct a rooftop addition, alter and construct new facades at the rear, and replace a window on the front facade. This was last seen at the public hearing on December 10th, 2019, and no action was taken at that time.
Good morning, Commissioners. Olivia Needham, Preservation Staff. 825 Prospect Place is located in the Crown Heights North Historic District on the north side street between Northern Avenue and New York Avenue. The proposal before you is to construct a rooftop addition. Modify the rear facade, and to alter the configuration at the center bay window. The item initially heard at the public hearing of December 10th, 2019, where no action was taken. At that time, the Commissioners had concerns about the visibility of the rooftop addition and requested that the height of the addition be lowered to reduce visibility, and that the addition and safety railings be set back further from the eastern wall, that the material of the addition be changed from brick masonry to stucco or standing seam, and that the configuration of the second floor bay window be restudied. The applicant and architect, James Cleary, is here to explain all the changes that he made in response.
Okay, can we have a motion to open the proceedings? All in favor?
Morning, Commissioners. So this sheet is an account of the existing conditions, just to very quickly refamiliarize you with them. The building has face brick on the front and on the side yard, and then where it steps back on the side, that rear portion of the building is much more utilitarian construction. So what we had proposed originally is on the left on this slide, and on the right is our revised proposal. And to summarize what we've done, you had asked that we make the addition shorter, lower its height, and we were able to do that by 18 inches compared to what it was when we first presented it to you. You also asked if we could push the front back, and we were able to push it back 4 feet from what it was before. So instead of a 15'7" setback, which is on the left, it's now a 19'7" setback. We were also, if you look at the railing on top, I don't know if this okay, great. So the railing up here, we've been sort of read the code over a few times, and we are allowed to pull that in 6 feet on the side. So we've done that so that basically becomes no longer visible from the street from any angle. So just from different perspectives. The back has changed a bit. Just essentially, we've pushed the addition back, which we were stepping in a couple times on the back end. If you remember, removing some of the existing buildings to get latent air. We're still doing that, but we're removing less of it than we were previously. Section, this was what we showed you a month ago. And again, here's what we've done. Back 4 feet and down 18 inches. On the left, the only thing that was visible before was the handrails from the railing, and now nothing is visible from straight on. You can see again, it's just original and revised, becoming much less visible. And same, so this sliver that you see on the left where there's that narrow opening. And this is a diagram of sort of visibility. So where it was visible before from the street, and it's been cut almost in half. And just keep in mind, as we'll see in a minute, as you move out towards the edges, you're seeing less and less of this. It's not fully visible along each of those. So again, original proposal on the left, revised on the right. So starting on the right-hand side of that diagram, before you can see a sliver of it, there's now nothing visible. Moving in some more, you can see the reduction. It's 40% less visible from that angle. Again, a little over 40% less visible from that angle. Again, the blue in this is the railing, and the red is the addition. So the railing is no longer visible. Again, we pulled it back and pulled it down. And as you move in, it becomes completely visible. A little closer to our building. But the other side, I'll just run through these pretty quickly. Someone wants to see again, becoming much less visible. And then invisible as you get further down. This is a photo on the left. This is not our building. This is 815 Prospect Place, which was approved, I believe, in 2017 by the commission. And this from sort of the same angle, but from the opposite side because of visibility, is our current proposal on the left. Elevations of what we have proposed, where we are. So then you can see dropping down and dropping back.
What is the material on
Standing seam metal, on
the basement building in the back?
in the back, that's common brick. So from this point forward is face brick, the same as on the front facade. In the back is much more utilitarian. And we're proposing standing seam, which was recommended by the commission. Again, the previous proposal and the new one that drops down in the back. The rear elevation, again, you can see we come down, the railing has come in, and we've sort of simplified the back elevation a bit with these visions and review of it. So I don't know if I should stop. The next issue is sort of proposals right there. Okay. So in our previous proposal, we were proposing splitting this front window with a narrow divider and having a single diamond. We're still proposing that, but with two diamonds, which I think it looks much better. Again, you had seen this last time to show that there are 5 of these sort of siblings along the block, and there's a certain variety. 2 of them have porches, 3 don't. The proportion is actually very bad on some of the windows at the mullion patterns. The commissioners raised last time the question of why do you need light and air? We're proposing to do this because we need adequate light and air for the front bedrooms. And the question was raised, well, you've got all these fantastic windows on the side, you don't need any light and air. But for this building in this zone, we're not allowed to use any window within 30 feet of the side or rear lot line cannot be used for required light and air. That's not true in every zone. But for an R6 zone, it is. And also it's important to note, even if we were not adding to the building, this would impact us. We're not creating this non-compliance that we then have to split the window. It would be the case even if we did not do rooftop addition. So again, just showing at the top, this is what we're proposing. Each room is 89 square feet, and each gets 14.7 square feet of light. You need at least 12 is the minimum, or 10%, whichever is greater. If we were to not split the window, the problem is that that single window only has 70.3, I believe, square feet of light. Even if we made the room the minimum size allowable, 80 square feet, we wouldn't have enough light and air to make the habitable room. So we're hoping the commissioners can we're hoping that this is acceptable to allow us to do that.
Are there any questions?
Yeah.
Yes.
What's the color on the finish on that standing seam?
On the addition, the idea is that it will be a light zinc color.
Okay.
It may be a similar, or equals in it.
Any other questions? Okay, all right, thank you for the presentation.
Thank you.
So, there are 2 parts to this application. We're cutting back the rear and windows on the front. And I think last time, there was a lot of testimony about the additions, how it compared to the one the commission previously approved at the other end of the road. And we as a commission asked the applicant to consider reducing the visibility and size of the addition. So they made some pretty substantial changes, not to get 18 inches and making that 4 feet, entire railing at 6 feet. And I think showed us how it compared to the addition of condition two. So, while different shape, it's probably sort of comparable in the amount of space. The one difference is that this building has 2 free sides, so you do get a little bit of front and a rear side. And then with the windows, we were somewhat mixed. I think you were a little more flexible until we started to look at the plan and thought, oh, you could probably change the configuration and keep a single window. But the applicant, whether that's not feasible. So it's really a question of whether you have 2 bedrooms or whether you have on this floor. And I think it's worth noting that we're not moving any historic window, and we're actually giving a configuration that is closer to the historic. In other words, there's already some variety. So, any thoughts?
Your thoughts and my thoughts.
Others? Okay. Yes. Okay, great.
Hey, nice presentation too, verbally and graphically. In the matter of 825 Prospect Place, Heights North Historic District, this is an application to construct a rooftop addition, alter and construct new facades at the rear, and replace a window at the facade. I note that the building's style, scale, materials, and details are among the features that contribute to the special architectural and historic character of Crown Heights North 2 Historic District. I further note that the district's boundaries cut through the center of the block. I recommend approval, noting that the proposed work will not damage or eliminate any significant architectural features. That the proposed rooftop addition will only be visible obliquely over the building's side facades through narrow side yards and will not be visible from directly across the street. That the standing seam aluminum siding of the proposed rooftop addition is in keeping with typical utilitarian rooftop accretions and will not draw undue attention to itself. That the rooftop railings will not be visible from the street, up from the east, and only obliquely visible from the west side yard. That the alterations to the rear of the building, including cutting back a portion of the simply designed historic rear extension, will increase the open space in the center of the block and will not affect or detract from the main volume of the house. That the cumulative effect of the rooftop addition and reduction in massing at the rear of the building will not overwhelm the building. That the design of the proposed rear facades, including brick masonry walls with punched single and double height openings, will harmonize the surrounding buildings on the block. That the introduction of a mullion and paired windows at the front floor of the bay window on the primary facade will not change the overall character or proportion of the bay. That the configuration of the window sash will recall the historic configuration and will be harmonious with the overall fenestration, and that the work will not detract from the special architectural and historic character of the building or the Crown Heights North 2 Historic District.
All in favor? Aye. Any opposed?
Okay, we're going to move to the public hearing item number 1, LPC 20-01262. An application for a certificate of appropriateness in the Borough of Brooklyn, block 2118, lot 33, 3-way Cumberland Street, the Borough of Historic District, and Italian style roadhouse built in 1959. The application is to replace windows.
Commissioners, Greene, Preservation Staff. The item before you is 308 Cumberland Street in the Fort Greene Historic Historic District. The building is located on the west side of the street between Lafayette and Greene Avenues. The application is to replace windows throughout the facade. The windows are currently 1/1 double hung wood windows, and the applicant is proposing 1/1 double hung aluminum clad wood windows with the exception of the basement windows, which will be all wood. And all of the new windows will feature a profile brick mold, which you can see here. So the 1940s tax photo shows the 1/1 configuration for this building. And the Fort Greene Historic District has a line in the architectural introduction stating that 1/1 plate glass windows are typical of Italian style buildings. However, staff is unsure if this was the historic configuration for this building based on its 1859 construction date and early Italian style. So here we have a little study of the row. So this is 310 Cumberland Street, the building directly next door. It looks like it had 1/1 windows in the 1940s tax photo, and it currently has 1/1 at the basement and first floor, and 2/2 at the second floor. It's a little difficult to tell in this picture because it has 1/1 storms, but I've been there, it is 2/2 underneath that. This is 306 Cumberland on the other side. That also had 1/1 windows in the 1940s, and it currently has 6/6, which were present at the time of designation. So those are current operating condition. And we have 304 Cumberland, so that also had 1/1 windows in the 40s, and currently has 1/1 in the basement and first floor, 2/2 above. Staff did approve those 2/2 windows 2 years ago. 302 Cumberland, 1/1 tax photo, 1/1 now. Those sort of weird transom windows at the parlor floor are windows, and those were present anticipation. 300 Cumberland Street had 1/1 tax photo, and no, 2/2. And 298 Cumberland Street had 1/1 throughout the building except for the basement floor in the 40s where it had 2/2, and now it has these weird multi-light casements that were there designation. And 296 Cumberland had 2/2 in the 40s and has 2/2 now. So that's just sort of the row we're looking at, trying to figure out what is the best way to go forward with this one. And the applicant is here to further discuss the application and answer any questions.
Marie, if you had to bet your life on what the original windows were on this building, what would you say?
I had to bet my life
Yeah,
on
you
it.
can bet your life
It's a
on
lot of pressure. Well, I think based on what we know about the technology of windows in 1859, we think that 1/1 was unlikely for this kind of building. Those would have been really expensive and would have been seen on more high-style buildings than this one.
So that's
Hello, my name is Chris. I have a company called Window and Door Pro. This is my client. Do you have any questions? Let's start with that.
Does your client really care about this 1/1 versus 2/2?
They don't. The concern is a maintenance issue. They're making a significant investment as these windows are, and they would like to have a glass window so it doesn't deteriorate. That's where the wood brick likely no compromise come in. And the height of the building is hard to keep those.
So the number of lights in the window is not as much an issue for them as the flat.
It's not. Actually, they would like 2/2. But the latest revision to the code says that you can't do grill. You can't do that, unless I'm mistaken.
Yeah, so this application is kind of twofold, but because the applicant's first request and most important request for them is to have the aluminum clad wood windows rather than wood windows, the staff rules don't allow any multi-light windows in small buildings like this to be an alternative material. So even though they're willing to do 2/2 because they want the metal cladding, that sort of kicks it out of the staff level.
Right, so the rules allow the staff to approve an aluminum or aluminum-clad window where, when the historic window in the row house was 1/1, provided there's a wood brick wall. But if it's, if it was historically a multi-light window, the staff has to approve, can only approve wood, and the idea behind that rule was that, 1/1 window, really the most decorative portion of the window was the brick mold, and the sash frame was fairly flat and a small surface area. And so that's why the rule allows the staff to approve aluminum, building that historically has 1/1 windows. In row houses, of course, in large apartment buildings, the staff can approve aluminum windows. Okay, let's take some testimony from that. Brittany Thomas.
Good morning, Brittany Thomas, Historic Districts Council. As this row historically consisted of homes with wood windows, HDC does not find the substituting of materials here to be appropriate and fears that it would set a bad precedent. If the brick molds are made of wood, we suggest replacing all of the current windows with new wood windows. Thank you.
Is there anyone else who'd like to speak on this application? We do have a resolution from Committee Board 2 recommending approval of the application. Any final questions for the applicant? Let's have a motion to close the hearing.
Second.
All in favor? Okay, so it's an interesting discussion. I think that, as Marie said, the technology at the time, what we know about window technology leads us to believe that the windows historically were not 1/1, probably 2/2. And we know that one building in the row had a 2/2 window at the time of the tax photo. But even at the time of the tax photo, all of the other buildings had been changed to 1/1. So there is, of course, 1/1 configuration, something that existed historically, just not originally within this row and in this building. So I think it's an interesting question for us to think about configuration. And then if the commission finds 1/1 appropriate, then an aluminum clad window would be that level. Yes.
It is an interesting question because I think what it exposes is something that we've all noticed over the years, that there's an odd conjoining of aluminum replacement windows that one sees in a large apartment building on West End Avenue and an aluminum clad wood window like this. And although they do share the material of their outside 1/32 of an inch, they don't share very much else. They don't share the mechanics, they don't share the profiles. And I think that, someone besides Michael Devinger would be hard pressed to notice the difference at a distance of more than 15 feet, less than 15 feet. I personally am okay with the material change. It's not a building that the materiality of the wood, I think, is particularly noticeable or significant. I think that the trade for getting possibly those 2/2s is worthwhile because for me, seeing that there is some evidence of 2/2s in the neighborhood and it just looks a lot more correct. Again, not being an expert to that degree in terms of the technology, but I think that just as a whole, the house as a facade looks better to me. I would take that view.
Advisor, you don't use phrase like trade.
Sorry.
Demand.
I think the wood windows here are actually important. And as that sort of conforms with the ability for 2/2 as well, I think it's the right way to go. So I don't know that I agree with you anything about the fact that it's not visible. It should be wood.
And I think we have done it in row houses both, we have approved on occasion aluminum clad windows for 2/2.
We definitely have, and in most cases it's been, I think in particular when the current windows are not the historic windows that are in place, but the commission has approved, in particular, aluminum clad wood as opposed to just an aluminum window that has poor details on many occasions.
So you're nodding your head, so,
Well, 2/2.
yeah.
And cladding is fine. But we can't, I don't think we can do clad add 2 over 2. Is that-
The commission can, and as far as we have done in the past.
So it can be clad, and it can be 2 over 2. I'm completely fine with clad. I mean, I agree with Michael that the profiles of these windows are good. I mean, especially compared to aluminum, they look great from the outside. You cannot tell the difference in most pre-war buildings. And if it's possible, then let's do 2 over 2.
Agree? Okay, sorry. You have enough of the 2 over 2 of one class, I want to give you the
I
chance.
think if staff is satisfied that the beat and work on the brick mold is suitable when it's clad, I think clad 2 over 2.
So, do you need to make a motion? Or is it?
In the matter of LPC 20-01-262-308 Cumberland Street, Fort Greene Historic District, an Italianate style row house built in 1859, the application is to replace windows. I note that the building style, scale, materials, and details are among the features that contribute to the special architectural and historic character of the Fort Greene Historic District. I recommend approval with some modifications, finding that the work will not eliminate any significant historic fabric, but the proposed windows will recall the historic windows in terms of operation, details, and finish, that the historic brick molds will be replaced in kind, and the change in material from wood to metal-clad wood will not be perceptible. However, I recommend that, however, I find that although the 1940s tax photograph shows 1/1 double hung windows at the front facade, the building's 1859 construction date and Italianate style indicates that the configuration of the historic windows would have likely been 2 over 2. Therefore, I recommend that the configuration of the new windows be 2 over 2 to match the likely original condition.
Second.
All in favor? Any opposed?
We move to item number 2, this is LPC 20-04334, an application for a certificate of appropriateness to the Borough of Brooklyn, Block 236, Lot 99, 127 Hicks Street, in the Brooklyn Heights Historic District, an Anglo-Italian style row house built in 1849. The application is to install windows, decorative details, and cornice at the primary facade.
Good morning, Commissioners. Elizabeth Diker, Preservation Staff. The item before you is 127 Hicks Street. The building is located on the east side of Hicks Street, south of its intersection with Clark Street, within the Brooklyn Heights Historic District. The proposal before you today is to install windows, decorative details, and a cornice at the primary facade. In this historic image from 1915 at the top, we can see that originally the building at 127 Hicks Street matched its neighbor at 125 Hicks Street, and prior to 1940, the 1940 tax photograph being at the bottom, we can see that a top floor was added and the cornice was removed from this building. Here we can see existing conditions of 127 Hicks Street, including the non-original top floor added prior to 1940. We can also see that a lot of the original decorative details, including brownstone sills and lintels and surrounds, were removed, which occurred prior to designation. The applicants have studied the brownstone details and cornice at the neighboring building of 125 Hicks Street and are proposing to replicate them at the subject building. The applicants are proposing to recreate the brownstone sills and lintels using cast stone and replicate the cornice and painted wood from 125 Hicks Street. And the applicants are also proposing to install 4x4 double-hung wood windows at the non-original top floor, which matches the historic condition at the second and third floor. Here we can see the details of the proposed cornice at the cornice and the first floor door surround. This slide shows the decorative details of the second and third floor window surrounds. And finally, here we can see the details of the proposed fourth floor windows at the non-original top floor. The applicant is also here to discuss additional information and answer any questions about this proposal.
And just to clarify for the commission, the restoration of the windows and the window surrounds at the lower floors is eligible for a staff level permit pursuant to our rules. It's really a question about this top floor, which was never there historically. And so the proposal is to do a similar window configuration, similar cornice, and simplified details around those windows.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Arturo Bárcenas from NDDA, and I'm here to answer any questions you might have.
So do you want to talk a little bit about the details of the cornice and how it compares to the neighbors? And similarly, your decision on the window details and the choice to not to replicate the lintels exactly.
Right, so the cornice will be, we're trying to recreate the cornice by the original one by replicating the neighboring building.
It'll match the one on the...
Yeah, so the proposal is to match exactly the crown molding and the ornamental frieze and the 9 brackets that are in the original and painted wood. For the window surround, we're also replicating the existing details in the neighboring building on 125th, in the second and third floor. In the parlor level, what we want to replicate is actually the historic condition, which has a little bit more detail with a projecting lintel and leaf-shaped portals, 2 on either side of the door, and the window, so that's what you see in the
But at the top floor, which is what the commission had, we took a slightly different approach.
right. The 4th floor, being that it's not original, what we did is what we're proposing, and of course we welcome your feedback and suggestions, but what we decided to do is don't have a projecting lintel and portals on top, but just a projecting sill, so that it somehow is our hope that it relates to the rest of the facade, but it makes it's different in that it makes it clear, possibly, that it's original, and also being that it's on top, just of the windows, the detail goes less detail on top. Yes.
Other questions? Have some testimonies. We'll come back to you. Judy Stanton.
Judy Stanton for the Brooklyn Heights Association. We support the proposal. We think restoring the style of the house's original door surround, lintel lintels and sills, and corner windows is appropriate. We also think adding a cornice and 4/4 windows to the early 20th century top-story addition is a welcome change and in keeping with the style of the original design. Our only suggestion is for staff to work with the project team to ensure that masonry materials are suitable for the size and type of each design element. The drawings simply specify new brownstone, which of course would be acceptable, but we understand the elements could be built up stucco, framed stucco, or cast stone. That should be worked out in advance and specified in the certificate of appropriateness. Thank you.
Thank you. Is there anyone else who'd like to speak on this application? And we have a resolution from Brooklyn Community Board 2 recommending approval of the application. Any final questions? Okay, final remarks before we close the hearing?
No, just in regards to the comment of the decorative pieces being brownstones, we actually have decided since that presentation that they will be cast stone, and we will work with that person to make sure that they're located.
Let's have a motion to close the hearing.
Second.
All in favor? Okay. So all in all, it's really a very restorative application. application, and in fact, most of it is exact restoration. It's really a question of how they treat this non-original top floor. I think we're bringing a cornice, even not just a historic cornice is good for the building, it's good standard. Similarly, I think, the approach to the windows relate. You can feel comfortable with the 411 configuration? Okay. And any other thoughts about the simplified details of this place? I think it's honest.
Yeah, I think it's appropriate because it signals that it's more like an attic floor, so less decorative.
In the matter of LPC-20, that's 04334, 127 Hicks Street, Cumberland, Historic District. Application is to install windows, decorative details, and a cornice at the primary facade. I note that the building style, scale, material, and details are among the features that contribute to the special architectural and historical character of the Brooklyn historic history. I also note, I recommend that the proposed cornice, in keeping with the scale and detail of the original missing cornice, and will return a substantial termination to the building's primary facade. That the proposed 4/4 double-hung window at the top floor will relate well to the historic windows originally found on the lower floor of the building, and will reinforce the style and character of the building and other buildings in the row. That the painted wood replacement cornice and cast stone windows and sills will match with the historic adjacent intact row houses in terms of materiality, placement, dimensions, details, and finish. That the lack of visible on the top floor window serves to identify this floor as a laser issue, and that the proposed work will enhance the special architectural and historical character of the building and historic history.
All in favor? Any opposed?
The next item is number 3, LPC 19-25982. An application for certificate of appropriateness of road Manhattan, block 176, lots of number 10, 39 and 41 Worth Street, the 39 Worth Street building, 41 Worth Street building, two Italianate style store lot buildings designed by Isaac F. Duckworth and also circa 1865 to 66. The application is to construct roof additions and install roof batteries.
Good morning, Commissioners. Richard Larry, and Preservation staff. The two individual landmarks, we've got 39 and 41, 39 on the left, 41 on the right. 39 and 41 West Street buildings are located on the north side of West Street at the interjunction with West Broadway, sandwiched in between Tribeca East, West, and South historic districts. Just to note, the two zoning lots were merged in the 1980s, and the two tax lots were merged a couple of years ago, and they are run by the same condominium board. Here's some of the historic photographs. The proposal is twofold. Construct a grade finish metal clad single story rooftop addition on the rear half of the two buildings with stair bulkhead, roof decks, and roof railings. And secondly, to install a roof ladder on the existing fire escape cornice to provide an egress. The architect Shane Murdoch, of Murdoch Sullivan Architects, is here to present the proposal and answer any questions.
Good morning. My name is Shay Murdoch, Murdoch Stone Architects. First, I'd actually like to thank Richard and the staff who have been extremely helpful, and their feedback has been really constructive, and I really appreciate that. We can go back to the mass. So this is a one-story addition on the 5th floor to the 6th floor, and we have worked with staff to push it back as far as possible from Ward Street so that it is minimally visible from Ward Street in context of the Italianate cast iron facade. However, it extends across both buildings. So from 39, it would be an extension of 39 extending across to 41 at the roof level. This is the existing west party wall with a stepped brick facade, stepping from the front to the back. And this is the proposed addition. There's a bulkhead taking you up to a roof terrace on the level of 39 with utilities and storage and some open space on the roof of 41. This section, we have reduced the height to now we're at a 8'6" ceiling, as low as we can go on that, and we're also maxed out on the height of the building. So we've sunken into the existing structure to some degree to allow that minimum clearance. There is you'll see here, along with, the visibility is primarily from West Broadway. There's a broken tube in the street wall on West Broadway, which allows visibility. So you've got a stepping series of buildings that continue back even beyond the law school. So the idea was that this structure begins to blend in with kind of a cacophony of bulkheads and buildings beyond us. And then we've taken steps to change the material so that it visually tries to feel like it's part of a building beyond.
What's the dark gray material on your facade?
The dark gray is, in order to, it's almost a reveal between the stepping facade of the existing party wall, which steps as it comes back, and then the straight structure, which is floating above that. So that was, it's almost as a
it's just a different paint color on the metal.
It's set back a little bit, and it's a different color material.
Okay.
So acting as a...
But if they're both metal.
They're both metal.
And one set back.
That's correct, yes. Photographs of the mock-up. Right, so here you can see it begins to blend in with a series of other structures that come beyond from West Broadway. That's the tall, the law school and other water tanks and bulkheads, and the hope is that it doesn't stand out as part of this building. It really begins to blend more. That's also the intent of the changing materials. That's why it's not gray, so that it starts to become part of the backdrop of the abandonment of the other buildings behind it. This is from West Broadway south of Ward Street, and you can see that it is not visible in the same context, in the same view as the front facade. And we've taken lengths to minimize that. So West Broadway is our exposure. It's not seen in the context of the front facade in any case. And this building happens to be a isolated, it's not within the context of a landmark district, it's an isolated building. So its context is actually a non-landmark district, the remainder of the buildings around it. And that is the only location where you can see the front facade and the addition. The far left, you can see just the corner, lower left, just the corner of the addition in the mock-up. So that's the extent that you'll see those in conjunction with one another. This is the ladder. So the ladder is minimal. We're trying to, there's an arch pediment in the center of the 39 building, which we're off to the left of, intentionally to avoid that, and we're going to make it as minimal as possible. We're also proposing to paint that and the remainder of the fire escape white or off-white to sort of match the facade, which we believe it was originally from the historic photos. I think it's currently black, it's dark gray. So we're going to try to make that disappear into the facade by painting it to match, and then have a minimal ladder to get up, which we obviously will need for egress. This is just the rear of the facade. We're sort of landlocked back there. There was a discussion of looking to put a fire escape on the back, and that we have nowhere to go. We're trapped in there. There's no easements. You're stuck. This is just some other precedents of ladder extensions from fire escapes over the cornice. We're not going to be affecting the cornice in any way. We're going to clear the cornice. And then there's just some subsequent documents.
Are there any questions? Let's take some testimony. Is there anyone here who'd like to speak up? Anyone like to speak on this application? So we do have a resolution from Community Board 1 recommending that the application be denied based on feasibility.
Yes, from West Broadway.
Okay, any final questions? From West Broadway. That's the view that you see it over the buildings that face West Broadway. Can you see that view? That's this view. Yeah, right, that's this one.
Right, so you have two lower buildings in front of you.
Yeah.
And it begins to, it's a stacking of varied materials, almost a mishmash of bulkheads and chimney extensions and water tanks.
Do you have a rendering of the ladder detail over the cornice?
We did not render the ladder, no.
The front elevation?
We have a front elevation, yes, I'm going to go back to that. That was actually the very first slide.
I wasn't aware of the issue later in the presentation.
Sure, understood. So there it is, that's...
You're not touching the cornice.
We're not touching the cornice. There was a section that showed that. I can flip back to that. There it is.
And that was what caught my eye. And could you just show us the photos of the buildings from the trunk again? Sure. That's not rendered.
Just the other way.
So would you point out where the stairs come?
Do I have a pointer?
Yeah, the top of
Okay. So it will come up right to the left of this arched pediment. Over the flat section. Over the flat section, that's correct.
And you're painting all of the fire escapes to match?
Yes, that's
both
the intent,
buildings.
so both buildings, correct, so they will all blend in, color match to the facade itself. Similar to the precedents that we looked at. So,
Any last questions? Yes, Everard. This is a code function issue. Are you going to design it in any special way that it not look like it just applied to this facade?
the ladder?
Yeah,
The ladder? Well, we're looking at precedents. And typically it's, very simple ladder with a hook that takes you up over the top to then the steps that go down the backside of it. So we're trying not to draw too much attention to it. It's going to have some tiebacks to the building, very similar to the top right, and be a minimal ladder.
And at the top, yours is going to actually have square though, it's not going to be the curve. I think that's what I saw in the section.
Yes, although I think we're open to suggestions on that.
And I think
I don't know if that was the
it's
staff level
required by code to have the 4-inch space picket.
It is required by code now, and that's also the rail. We had horizontal rail at one point, and that's not allowed anymore.
And could you do a cable mesh instead of the 4-inch pickets, just to make it a little more transparent?
Yes, we could, absolutely. Anything as long as it meets the open area requirements. The vertical pickets are what's happening on the lower ones, so it's
All right, any final questions? Yeah.
Looking at the plan, it seems that the addition is sitting on top of the parapet walls. Is that the plan?
Yes,
Can
it
they
is
sit
sitting,
inside?
I'll go back to this section here that explains that a little bit. There, this one. There. So in the rear, we have pulled it back. This was, came early on in the discussions with staff, to pull it back from the rear facade. And that's the existing elevation of the parapet in the back. And then, of course, it steps as it comes around the corner. Structurally, the structural engineer wants to tie the entire parapet together. So there's a bond beam, this is a concrete bond beam that runs on top. You're going to take the parapet down to a certain height, run a continuous bond beam that will tie the building together, and then bring the new brick back up to match the old brick to the stepping facade. And that reveal, we're willing to discuss with staff, perhaps changing the step angle to minimize that reveal. But this is also the load bearing of the facade. So when we talked about moving this in, the structural engineer was very reluctant because he wants to bring the vertical loads down to the parapet and onto this grade beam. And the grade beam is tying the entire parapet together. So that location is driven by structural engineering. It's already relatively narrow based on the program that the owner's trying to put in there.
So you could actually raise the brick parapet to reduce the ADM.
We could, and the earlier stages, we brought it up to a straight line, and then it was suggested that it might be keeping the historic step party wall condition, might be more in keeping with this, original design, although it was a party wall.
And the floor height is
8'6" without mechanical.
Floor to ceiling.
Floor to ceiling, so it's 7'6" inside with mechanical in some areas. Yeah, we were higher and we came down, so this is as low as we can go without It's not even a legal habitable space below 40 feet.
Other questions? Okay, let's have a motion to close the hearing. All in favor? So, discussion. Yes. Sure.
A couple of things are bugging me a little bit here. I'll just voice it, and I'm not sure where I am on this. I'll listen to others, but the new ladder over the elaborate cornice, it doesn't touch the cornice, right? Sure. But yet, it creates a new obstruction, a new visual complication that I think makes me appreciate that the cornice is somewhat less. So, knowing that this is a self-inflicted wound, self-inflicted need, didn't have that, if you were above the ability to do that. I guess there's no other way of dealing with the issue. So I think it's a conundrum of sorts, and just raise the trouble with it. I'm not sure the answer to this thing is an issue. The second one is the color of the, and was it the white that you're suggesting for the there?
It's actually zinc.
Yeah.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Richard can answer.
Sure.
It's a light gray finished metal cladding.
Metal clad, okay. Well, it appears, at least in this rendering, it's white above gray. And I think there are two problems with white in our city generally. White doesn't stay white, and it just looks awful soon enough, and not white. And I think it attracts your eye as opposed to doing what it should do, which is to not attract your eye. It just becomes part of that gestalt of rooftop accretions and go somewhat darker gray. So those are my two thoughts.
But you're generally open to an addition that you see over the side facade from...
I think so, if it doesn't call such attention as it does right now, because of the white. Because of the white.
And
Yeah, I agree with the light color, but, and I know normally we suggest using a sort of this damascene metal material, but in this case it seems to be it's so visible that I think it's calls too much attention to itself, and I wonder if the stucco might be better. Maybe you just sort of see, into the background. And I'm really troubled by that reveal, that tall reveal, and I think it'd be more appropriate to raise the brick parapet to hide that if possible.
okay, and any thoughts on the ladder?
I'm okay with
I agree with that, the carpet, getting rid of that really, I don't have a problem with if there's a flat zinc, like so that it looks like you got a lead coated copper almost, the flat finish. I don't have a problem with that at all. I think the term cacophony was used, it is up there. And actually for me, in that neighborhood, that god-awful cancerous tumor on that corner building is what always draws my attention. I really just want to throw a bomb through that thing. There's so much going on in the fire escape on this building that that little addition of the ladder doesn't bother me at all. It's going to be painted out.
I generally agree with what said at the race of the parents, better way to handle the volume. And I do think that the metal is for me a better solution. I think that part of the problem here is you're rendering and shooting yourself in the foot. I think that if you look at what a turn or a lead or copper kind of look would be, like Michael said, it would be considerably darker. I could see in this location we have a lot of tar on the sides. I can see going darker. I think you should really suggest look at the fenestration. I think one thing that strikes me about it that we're reacting to, or not reacting to, is that its visibility is not yet looking like it wants to blend into that cacophony as a piece of the rooftop paraphernalia. It's looking very much like a building perched there and looking out with its principal facade. It's very designed and ordered and regular. And I would just suggest that it shouldn't look like that. It should look like part of the rooftop paraphernalia that it seeks to blend in with. And that could be helped not only by looking at the color of the metal and the parapet modification, but also by perhaps looking at the window scale, arrangement, quantity, so that it doesn't look so much like a building and more like rooftop stuff.
Yeah, I agree with the previous comments. It's an interesting one that Michael just raised about the administration as well. I think that we're seeking to make the addition fit in from several different perspectives, and from one a lighter shade might have made sense, but from this aspect it doesn't work as well, obviously. So I think some kind of neutral, and I think the metal is fine, and a more gray color or something. It might be with the fenestration, and it does, in fact, look like a piece of building in part because of the fenestration. So I think that could be helpful too. But I think all of these things that you work with staff on, and also I don't have any problem with the ladder.
I'm in agreement with a lot of these comments, and Michael, your comments very interesting. I was wondering if the ladder could maybe be moved over a little bit so that it's not quite over.
Use the arch.
Yeah.
The arch. Yeah, and the fire escape is on the other side.
Move to the left, isn't that right?
Yeah.
You're saying move to the left?
Yeah, move to the left. Is that
No, left, the other way, left that way. Looks like it goes all the way to the end.
Just to avoid the...
Just to avoid the arrow, as far left as possible.
I'm wondering if you look at drawing 11, whether you can shift the ladder because it's such a prominent corner at number 41. If you look at the path, you have the option of going east and maybe coming along the facade of the fire escape of the 41 rather than 39, because as Michael put it, you have such a prominent tumor already on the corner, you don't want to add another tumor.
So you're saying put it into the fire escape on the right?
Commissioners, I think there is an issue with the ownership, whereas that top floor on 41, the building on the right is not the same owner, and that ladder would block the window. I think that agreement has not been.
All right, so I think.
One last?
Yes.
If you go back to the perspective, from Broadway, the party wall, if your new structure, in terms of perception, if your new structure matched the party wall, that abstraction of the party wall and the object coming off of it could be softer. I agree that the rhythm of the window is so modern, so if that was rhythm that is didactic, if you made it simplify that and it got lost in the back wall, the perception would be different. So the color of the party wall and the color of your stucco and your zinc would match each other and would just blend in, if that's possible.
Okay, so I think.
Sorry, one last minute. We should look at the bulkhead. While I think the height of the general addition is fine, it's a 9, I think I read it was a 9-foot high glass door. Goodness gracious. And considering its visibility, I would suggest that that's perhaps a little much. And that the bulkhead should, as we treat all bulkheads, be minimized, perhaps with a slope top, as we do the bulkheads, try to keep it.
Okay. All right, so I think if you're all comfortable, we have have a number of modifications, I think all relatively tweaking and probably by staff. So I think we are supportive of an addition here and the ladder, as long as the ladder is as far left as possible. And that the addition be a dark, more neutral or darker finish, so that they study the finish with staff. Could be raised to conceal the real. And that the fenestration of the bulkhead at the addition be studied to look less regular. And that the bulkhead be, the staff can work with the applicant to reduce and consider the shape of the bulkhead to the extent possible. That sound right? Okay, great.
In Ladera, you can see 1925, 92, 39, and 41 Worth Street, 39 Worth Street building, and 41 Worth Street building, an individual landmark. The application is to construct rooftop additions and install a roof ladder. I note that the 39 and 41 Worth Street buildings are two individual landmarks located on the same lot. I recommend approval with modifications, several modifications. Noting that the construction of the proposed rooftop addition will not damage or destroy any significant architectural features, that the proposed rooftop addition will not be visible directly over the front facades and will only be visible over secondary facades above shorter neighboring buildings and against taller buildings in the background, that the rooftop addition will be set back from the front and rear facades, thereby helping to maintain a sense of the building's historic massing, that the metal cladding of the rooftop addition is consistent with other utilitarian rooftop accretions and will help it remain a secondary presence in the roofscape, that the proposed ladder from the roof and over the corners of the fire escape will help provide the necessary safety egress without causing the loss of any significant architectural features, that the ladder's placement in front of the cornice will be in keeping with the location of ladders to roofs typically found under the fire escapes of similar buildings within adjacent historic districts, and that the ladder's simple design in conjunction with repainting the fire escapes in a light finish will allow it to blend with the facade. However, I recommend that the applicant raise the stepped parapet intermittently at the lot line facade to conceal more of the addition, that fenestration be simplified, and that the metal cladding be given a duller gray finish similar to zinc, and that the bulkhead be minimized if possible.
All in favor? Any opposed?
We're going to move to item number 4. This is LPC 20-04501. The application for a certificate of appropriateness in the road on Happy Block 514, Lot 31, 127 Greene Street, in Soho, Castleton, Historic District. New brick style store building designed by William Baker and built in 1884. The application is to alter the storefront display area.
Good morning, Commissioners. James Russillo, Preservation Staff. 127 Greene Street is on the west side of Greene Street between Prince and West Houston in the Soho Castang Historic District. The application is to alter the storefront display window and install a large wood window. On the street, there's a number of similar Soho store and loft buildings that have been altered. Some that have been restored. Here's the existing conditions. And here's the proposed. The bulkhead would be retained. This is just the removing the wood infill and then putting in a new wood storefront window.
Any questions? All right, we have some testimony from Brittany and Thomas.
Greene Thomas, Historic Districts Council. A distinct characteristic of the Soho Cast Iron Historic District is the rhythm of its storefronts. While there exists some evident interventions at storefront windows in the Soho streetscape, HTC finds that the removal of the transom and enlarging of the display window at 127 Greene Street further exacerbates the interruption of this historic rhythm. The existing approved proposal showed in the presentation is appropriate as is, and we see no convincing reason to remove the transom. Additionally, it struck our committee that this presentation lacked a clear explanation of proposed materials. Our ability to determine appropriateness relies in part on these details, and they should be made explicit to the public who reviews applications beforehand. Thank you.
Thank you. Is there anyone else who'd like to speak on this application? We do have a resolution from Committee Board 2 in Manhattan recommending approval of the application provided there's a transom. So, provided there's a transom. The reason this is before us is...
I just to clarify a few things. Okay, just going back here. So this is, so the application is to remove the transom and the infill. You can see that while the frame is here, this is probably the 20th century, and it will be matching its twin building 125, which is also home.
So in the presentation, there are examples of other tall show windows in Soho, and I know in the past the commission has approved tall show windows as well. So, commercial nature of this district. Thank you, James. Is there anything you'd like to add before we close the hearing?
Architect. Thank you. My name is Andrew Rainiak. I'm an architect working for this project, and I think that James covered everything. Our client's intention in this project was to make the building as clean and historically accurate as possible. We have an existing landmark CAE for facade restoration, which includes new doors, replacement of this with ratty existing replacement windows. And we've done some other things, such as restore the honeycomb grill at the bulkhead of the window to match the building next door. This building was designed by this guy named William Baker, who really didn't do anything. Subsequently, he was just hired to copy the building adjacent by Henry Fernbach in the prior year. And in that existing building, you can also see that there's a full-height storefront window. It's really not clear from this historic record. We can't see on the tax photos exactly when these were done. But our feeling is that replacing the existing sort of ad hoc out of the field installed transom, which seems to be installed within the pre-existing frame, we're bringing in line with the adjacent building. We feel it's an appropriate condition along the street and the buildings across and adjacent. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay. Great. Any final questions? Is there a motion to close the hearing?
Second.
All in favor? Aye.
I think they're doing the right thing.
Seems very appropriate, especially given that explanation.
In the matter of LPC 20-04541, 127 Greene Street, Soho, West Island Historic District, a neo-Gothic style store building designed by William Baker and built in 1883-84. The application is to alter the storefront display window. I know that the building style, scale, materials, and details are among the features that contribute to the special architectural and historic character of the Soho West Island Historic District, and I recommend approval, finding that the configuration proposed storefront infill consisting of a large display window and an alleyway transom over an existing bulkhead will be consistent with typical infill found at altered buildings at the street, that the storefront framing will match storefront infill previously approved at the adjacent storefront at the adjoining twin building, 129 Greene Street, in terms of profiles, articulation, materials, and finish, helping to support a unified treatment of the building's base. And that the proposed work will not detract from the special architectural and historic character of the building and the Soho Cast Iron Historic District.
All in favor? Any opposed?
Okay, item number 5, LPC 20-04956, an application for a certificate of appropriateness of road and Abbey, block 643, lot 62 Gansevoort Street in Gansevoort Historic District. Wreck style tenement building designed by George Cumberland of 1880-81, altered to a market building in 1940 by Voorhees, Walker, Bolton, Smith, and enlarged in 2019 pursuant to certificate of appropriateness 1967. The application is to install new storefront and infill signage and light fixtures.
Good morning, Commissioners. Holly Hughes, Preservation Staff. This item is 62 Gansevoort Street, located between Washington Street and Greenwich Street in the Gansevoort Market Historic District. The proposal before you today is to install new storefront infill and light fixtures at the second bay. In 2016, the Commission voted to grant a certificate of appropriateness for work on the Gansevoort Street south side at all the buildings between Washington Street and Greenwich Street. The Commissioners will note that the storefronts shown in this rendering were included in that 2016 approval. The current proposal is to install a wood storefront at the second bay in the same plane as the previously approved storefront and featuring operable display windows, textured glass at the transoms, and paneled bulkheads, all finished black. The proposal also includes installing 2 pendant lights at the canopy. The applicant's here to walk you through the proposal and answer any questions.
Good morning, everyone. So I'm Maria. I work for Bellstout as a store designer. Just wanted to give you an introduction to the brand. So we are a British fashion brand established in 1924, and our main focus is outdoor, so all of outdoor adventure clothing. And we are relaunching in the US as we already had a store in Madison Avenue, and this will be our only store in the US right now.
Fast Stackelberg, Egan Space Park, and just run back to the beginning, probably summarize the scope of work. So really, we're just focused on the infill here at 62 Gansevoort Street. This was one of, you can see the sandor map illustrates, this is one of what was built originally as 5 tenement buildings. So these were sort of individual buildings that over time became combined, modified as many of the buildings in the district have been. The pre-work photograph, I think Holly showed you, this is the conditions prior to the current approval, which is looking at redeveloping the entire block front, restoring buildings up to here, adding to this building, and reconstructing the building on the far west end on Washington. This is the approved rendering. The scope of work that we're talking about today is in this location here. Next slide. This is the current condition. So these buildings from Greenwich Street, halfway down the block, are now complete. They've been rehabilitated. The addition at 6068 is under construction, as is the new construction at 7074 at the far end on Washington Street. An approved rendering for 60 through 68 Gansevoort Street with the adjacent buildings on either side. This building, which historically had been 5 stories, was cut down to 2 stories in 1940, and the commission approval raised the building back to 5 stories with a new uniform system of metal and glass storefront infill. At that time, there was no tenancy known for the base of the building, but Bellstat now has signed a lease for 62 Gansevoort Street. Next slide. And we're proposing this metal and glass storefront system you can see in these 2 rendered views. Next. Just to talk a bit about the component parts, as Holly mentioned, this is a wood and glass storefront system. It's proportioned traditionally with a multi-light transom, 2.5 foot wood bulkhead, all sitting within the existing store cast iron framework. The work really is just happening within that framework. The cast iron will all be finished in the same color as the adjacent storefronts. A slight recess to the storefront, which is in the same plane as the approved. These panels are proposed as optical. They'll open up and slide back right up next to the cast iron piers. Part of that is sort of part of the brand identity. It's sort of an outdoor brand that wants to bring some of that exterior environment into the store. So it's just these panels that will open up. I'll also point out that these 2 columns are not centered on the bay, so there are 4 panels here and 5, which align with the existing configuration and geometry of the cast iron. Signage is limited to just painted gold leaf on the transom. a painted wood sign at the front edge of this very deep marquee at 16 feet deep, and then a small sign suspended from the underside of the marquee for people traveling east-west on Gansevoort Street. These are some pre-work photographs just to illustrate what the conditions were. Next slide. You can see some of the cast iron piers, but those smaller columns were actually not visible at the time that we brought this project before the commission. Next slide. Roll down gates, brick and fill, primarily non-historic elements, but some really fine neo-Gret cast iron detailing, which has all been obviously restored. Next. Just a bit of history. This is a photograph that illustrates the five-story tenements which were built in the 1880s and then lowered down to 2 stories in 1940 as part of the change, as part of the market use and the adaptive use of these buildings and so many other buildings in the historic district. Next. Some tax photos that illustrate the conditions and use of the 5 tenements following the removal of the upper 3 floors. This is 62 Gansevoort Street. They had a tripartite arrangement with a heavy transom bar. And what's interesting to note, actually at 64, these had similar info. They actually had sort of operable storefronts historically. The storefronts at the far end had slightly different conditions. 66 had a storefront that had been sold outboard of those cast iron columns. But the eastern 3 set within the cast iron column line. Next slide. The district designation report talks about the ways of adaptive reuse, and we just included this slide to sort of illustrate how buildings in this district have been altered and modified from their earliest time. So the earliest sort of stage beginning with residential development and then was modified with the introduction of the first elevated, and the way these buildings which started as residential became used for commercial uses, and then slowly for market uses associated with the Gansevoort market. This is a photo looking on 14th Street. The next phase of development associated with refrigeration and the introduction of the High Line in the 1930s saw further changes, and then the designation report includes the period from 1972 onward as an important other phase about the sort of further adaptive use of buildings and how both physical changes to scale but also infill sort of have continued through the century and a half of these buildings' history. Next. The district is comprised of a series of different infill types. There are these very large glazed openings. There are ones that are more traditional, metal and glass with smaller lights, wood and glass, top left, and then others that are sort of more proportionally consistent with the historic infill but with new materials for tan and glass. So we see our storefront infill fitting within that structure very nicely. Next. Some historic images just showing the range of signage that existed, blade signs that hung below the canopies, obviously signage on the front edge of the canopies. We're taking inspiration from those images for our signage program. Next. This is an improved elevation that shows the storefront here at 62. And the next slide is the proposed. And just to get into some of the details, an approved elevation on the left and a proposed on the right. Again, the idea is to install the storefront directly behind these cast iron columns in the same plane as the other approved storefronts with a wood and glass system, 2 light fixtures suspended from the underside of the canopy, and then these, you can see the operation sort of defeated here at elevation. Those panels will fold back. The transoms will be fitted with a beaded glass. The windows will be clear glass, and the infill will all be dark finished wood and ready finish for the cast iron. Next. Some further details and some sections. Back to that if you have specific questions. Some of the detail of the recess of the infill. Next. And then some signage details. These are relatively small signs. These are 4-inch and 2-inch letters painted onto the transom glass, and then the 2 sign panels, the hanging marquee sign is 10 inches in height and about 4 feet in length, and the sign on the front edge of the canopy is 10 inches in height and about 4 feet in length as well. There are 3 different areas of signage that we're proposing. One is really at the active east-west along Gansevoort Street, and then the other is meant to be seen from across the street. But as I mentioned, the marquee is 16 16 feet deep. So this sign over the door will work the G shadows, which makes the sign on the front edge of the compartment quite important. And then some details for the light fixtures, which are glass globes onto a metal chain. And then finally, just to approve.
Questions? Let's see if there's any testimony. Is there anyone who'd like to speak on this application? Okay, I have a resolution from the Community Board 2 recommending approval of this application. So if there's no final questions, we'll just close this. All in favor? See, this is a commission-approved design, so the reason it's for us is because the rules don't allow the staff to do it as individual storefront design, but the commission has approved a plan for the building. But it is interesting, as Cass mentioned in the presentation, these were originally built as individual buildings. And even when they were combined in the 1940s, there was some variety in the storefronts. So in some ways, while the storefronts are appropriate as was proposed, the sort of uniformity is maybe not as characteristic of this particular district as might be in some other districts. So it's a variety.
First. Yeah, this is the first.
Right, so there may be more changes to come with the others. Or not. So, how do people feel? Very much. It's fine. I think that sort of variety is in keeping with the ad hoc character. So, yeah.
In the matter of LPC 20-04936, 62 Gansevoort Street in the Gansevoort Market Historic District. The neoclassic style tenement building designed by George Vuitton, built 1880-1881, altered to a market building in 1940 by Goldman's Walker, Foley and Smith, and enlarged in 2019 pursuant to Certificate of Appropriateness 19-6750. The application is to install new infill signage and light fixtures. I note that the building's style, scale, materials, and details are among the features that contribute to the special architectural and historic character of the Gansevoort Market Historic District. I recommend approval, finding that the proposed storefront design will retain the existing historic metal canopy and cast iron piers, and therefore will not eliminate any significant architectural features of the building. That the proposed storefront infill will fit within the previously approved openings at the same plane as the previously approved storefronts at the base of the building, thereby maintaining the rhythm and scale of the facade. That the proposed wood storefront, featuring operable display windows, textured glass, multi-light transoms, a profiled transom bar, and paneled bulkheads, all finished black, will be consistent with the variety of storefronts that historically existed at this building and other buildings in this historic district. That the installation of the pendant lighting beneath the canopy will be well scaled and in keeping with the industrial character of the canopy, and that the work will not detract from the special and architectural and historic character of the building or the Gansevoort Market Historic District.
Second.
All in favor? Any opposed?
We're going to move to the last item of the day, item 6, LPC 20-05254. Application for certificate of appropriateness of Avenue Block 843, Rockford, 1416 East 16th Street, Romanesque Revival Style Residence Hall, designed by R.H. Robertson, built in 1889. The application is to demolish portions of the rear facade and rear additions, enlarge the building at the rear, excavate the cellar, extend the chimney, alter the ground floor, and install signage, lighting, and windows.
Good morning, Commissioners. Elizabeth Bacon, Preservation Staff. This item is 14 to 16 East 16th Street, located on the south side of 16th Street between Union Square West and Fifth Avenue in the Ladies Mile Historic District. The building was originally constructed as a YWCA and designed by R.H. Robertson and later used as a health center. The application before you today is to demolish portions of the rear facade, excavate the cellar, and construct new rear yard and rooftop extensions for the purpose of converting the building into a hotel. Both the rooftop addition and rear facade of the proposed extension will be visible from public thoroughfares along East 16th and East 15th Streets. The application also includes work at the East 16th Street facade, including installing new sandstone cladding, entrance porticos and windows, all which recall the historic appearance and are based on historic photos, such as the photo you see here to the left, dated circa 1907. Small light fixtures are also proposed to illuminate the facade. The applicants are here to discuss the proposal and to answer any questions.
Good morning. My name is Richard Stone and I'm one of the owners of the property. I'm joined here today by the other owners of the property, Jamie Rubin and Navin Natarabi. So first of all, thank you for considering our application this morning. By way of quick background, we're a family office, we're not a fund, we're not a trade developer, and as such we're long-term holders and investors of assets. We've got decades of experience in dealing with the most historically sensitive buildings in London and Europe, including the former In-N-Out Club, which you'll see there at the top of Piccadilly Estate, in London, which is one of the most best known and historically sensitive buildings in all of London. We're converting it to a hotel with ancillary food and beverage, and we've been working closely with English Heritage, engaging not only the usual contractors, but literally artisans working on the historic plasterwork, flooring, fireplaces and so on. We're doing a similar concept to this property in New York, also in Grosvenor Square in the lower left. You'll see there, number 22 Grosvenor Square, also in London and Mayfair, which will be the sister hotel of our project here in New York. Also, historically sensitive Grade 2 listed building in London, where we've been again working closely with English Heritage. We're owners of north of 2 million square feet of central London real estate as long-term owners. That includes, on the bottom right, Burlington Arcade, which is in Piccadilly, retail arcade. We've actually recently celebrated the 300th anniversary of that. So in the last 3 to 4 years, we've invested increasingly in hospitality, with over 10 hotels now in various locations. Our plan now is to focus more and do more long-term investment in New York, and this property really represents a key investment for us. So, thank you.
So I'll take it from here. I'm Harry Kendall with BKSK Architects, and we're delighted to work with these owners. Having sat through the previous presentation, I guess we represent a British invasion of some sort. So that's kind of fun. Go back to the previous one. I'm going to be doing this presentation with my partner, Todd Poisson, also BKSK, of course. So these three images represent what we see as some of the opportunities, some of the describing briefly our approach to the street facade, represented by a conversion from the former healthcare center to a hotel. On the left, you see the Margaret Louisa. This was built as the Margaret Louisa home in 1891, and by the architect R.H. Robertson. As we go through the existing additions, you'll see that all of the stonework on the ground floor has been lost, and it's not just behind something it's considered usually. The fire escape in 1907 has been added before, but was not original. In the center, you see a drawing by R.H. Robertson, which we'll go into some more detail about, but it shows his original intention, which is, you see is referred to the designation for it, to have an additional floor and an attic floor roof on the street. And on the right, you see our approach to this, which is that we begin with a faithful restoration of the ground floor, which of course we want to detail.
Very, very sorry. We're not picking you up at all. So would you maybe just hold the mic? We're just not, for some reason, not picking you up.
Okay. And our approach for proposed new upper floors is to evoke the architect's original intentions, not in stone and brick, but rather in a modern, contemporary materiality that allows a bit of both and recognizes the 128 years between the time the building was built and now. Well, on two more. Start with where we are and what's here. You'll see where on the left side, you'll see from the bottom right, the southeast corner of the Lady Mile Historic District. It's quite an unusual site. It's a deep interior lot, mid-block. It goes from 16th Street almost to East 15th Street, but not quite. The angled line of the rear lot is reflective of the original farm lot. You see it, two other vestiges of it in the next door site, and then one skip over. So next. So the 1907 photographs, and this one that I think a little bit earlier, shows that the building rose well above the context. And as we know from the drawing we showed you before, and I'll show you more, it was intended to rise essentially 2 stories higher. In the meantime, as you see in the center photograph, the most immediate, obvious thing that strikes you is that the ground floor has been eviscerated. But also the building to the east has risen now above us. Yet there's a possibility that we could rise higher yet. You see that in the designation report, one small quote from Montgomery Schuyler says, it's a generally successful design, but something more was intended. And this begins, when we read this, we began to say, this may explain the importance of the penimented entrances, pair of entrances, strangely asymmetrical, but more that there was originally, we thought when we read this, a sort of tri-pediment composition. So, next please. And then we found the drawing, and everything sort of came alive. And once you see the drawing, you look back at the building was built and you say, well, there's a little spot. And 3 pediments does make a lot more sense than 2. And so that was a bit of a revelation. Yet it wasn't what was built, so there's also an intellectual puzzle there, which we'll get to, but by way of a lot more detail about the existing conditions. This drawing was prepared in 1892, 1 year after the building was built. So in the Department of Building Records, we learned that this was his second attempt to get these additional floors approved. Originally, it was, the building department said 6 stories is the maximum height for a lodging house. It was built as an annex to the YWCA, and it was mentioned that, and it was a lodging house for young women. He went back and he said, the rate being used is in correspondence is more akin to that of a hotel, and a hotel would be allowed to be higher. So we like this. And they said, no, it's a lodging house, it's too small. So it was, the original design was never realized, but not for lack of trying on the part of the client and the architect in concert. Next. So we asked ourselves, why was it that degree of importance to them? One is the tripartite, or the tri-pediment composition. The other is, it was a companion to the YWCA, which you see, which is in the site in the lot next door on 15th Street, now the Buddhist Center, and it had a prominent hip roof. So these buildings were seen as distinct yet harmonious. And as we see it, the pediment and its flanking slope roofs were meant to sort of tie them together to allow them to be separate. You see also here a single-story building in the original site plan. It remains, and a connecting corridor. So this was program space for the Y, and this was the way the women were locking here got to the Y and to the additional program space. Next. Now, another reason it was one might assume it was important to him is that this was what was being built in the Ladies Mile, what would become the Ladies Mile district around the site before and after. On the top row, you see a number of buildings with similarly or just expressive roof lines at both corner and mid-block, characteristic of the late 19th century, especially in this district. Below, you see a somewhat more hidden history of buildings that were built in a previous era and then enlarged, sometimes with just a roof, but not just quite a roof, and buildings that were built smaller and then expanded horizontally and vertically, and the same with this building, horizontally and vertically, and then a more interesting introduction of a contemporary note, and by happenstance on account of the fire, but actually a sort of interesting juxtaposition in this district. Next. And as all of you are very aware, this evolution of buildings in the Ladies Mile district has not stopped, and has even been encouraged to a degree insofar as these are grand buildings which have a lot of potential, and the commission has seen fit to encourage some of that potential. From various sources, the Hugh O'Neill building, of course, got its onion Jones back and it lost this floor that expanded. This building not built yet, but with an additional roof. Morris Adkins building also with minimal visibility, but an interesting topping to the roof. And lastly, this stands in for any number of setback contemporary additions that show their contrast. They reveal themselves not original, and they reveal themselves only minimally or somewhat, but there's a spirit of robust dialogue throughout the district. Now, Art Building has a unique history that makes it somewhat a different case, but it's certainly enjoying the context in which the evolution of these buildings is proceeding. Next. So, looking closer to the building itself. We talked about the ground floor, it's glaring. We can see that there are other a good deal of restoration and repair to be done in this building, which has been vacant for a while and was seriously underused for a long time before that. It's the way the building is configured now. The street facade here has a small courtyard in the body of the building and a larger courtyard in the rear, and this single-story building that Robertson also designed. This plan composite is meant to illustrate the degree of change that happened at the time that this building was converted in 1950 to a Sidney Hillman Health Center. And you see that the way the spaces were used, on the right, the original public spaces, on the left, the division of everything into exam rooms, health center stuff. Next. So, to show you three axiometrics that show the original complex of buildings on this site, what was changed since it was built, and then what we propose to change. So, in orange are things that have changed since it was built. Most of them are from the 1950s, and the ramp from 1994, but the building expanded a little bit in 1898. The roof was changed at some point. We don't really know. This courtyard was expanded greatly. This courtyard, we believe, was raised significantly, and elevator shafts added. So it's not a pristine condition behind. It's been greatly changed. Next. Of course, we are proposing somewhat more wholesale changes. It's a lot that I've talked about the potential. It's quite deep. It has a 20-foot rear yard requirement. We are proposing an as-of-right development for zoning. It's just appropriateness that's to be decided. So to make it function as a 60 to 80 room hotel, we need to use the full depth of the site, and the courtyard doesn't happen in the right way. So what we retain is the facade, of course. The restoration will happen here. The side walls to the depth of 45 feet on the west side and 86 feet on the east side. And we propose to retain, and will require deconstruction and reconstruction, the single floor Robertson building in the rear. It's meant to be a room within a room within a larger dining space that the hotel will have. That you'll encounter this historic fabric, and it's very nice inside the hotel. Next. What we will propose to put back there is an expanded courtyard, roughly at the center of the block, additional 7th floor on the street, rising to a pediment, sloping back on the sides as per Robertson's original intentions, and then a setback 8th floor and an even further setback 9th floor. That 8th floor happens in the rear too, and further setback on the partial 9th floor. Next. Last bit of housekeeping. This is so you understand the conditions of the building and what you see as you go through it now. We talked about the ground floor facade. The small existing courtyard is white brick. It's heavily damaged, and the courtyard will be removed. The material we'll be showing for it is kind of a evocation of the original courtyard material, but the courtyard is in a different place. Here we're looking at the single-story structure with the new roofing material, and this is the existing rear facade, which will be demolished. Next, looking a little closer at the single-story building by Robertson. It's been heavily altered where the program space got expanded from what was originally a thin corridor, but it has stone, it has brick, it has surviving fabric which we can make use of and celebrate. So I'll turn this presentation over to my partner Todd, as we talked about. We will be describing both the details of the literal restoration of the ground floor, very important to us, but also more the conceptual restoration of rebuilding an intention as we propose it. And so Todd will go into those details.
Thanks, Gary. I'm Todd Poisson, partner at BKSK Architects. So the upper row of drawings and photos are a bit of a summary of what you've already seen. The upper left is the 19th century drawing from Robertson. The 1907 photo that Gary talked about shows a parapet on the top of the building that Harry didn't quite dote on, that we're going to spend a minute or two on. It's 4.5 feet tall. It was built in lieu of the 7th and 8th floor extension that Robertson proposed. The lower left photograph shows it in its current condition. It has beautiful carved bookends, and it's quite a little arcaded parapet. We are not planning or proposing to remove it. The third drawing on the upper row is the existing street wall elevation, showing the intervention in the 1950s of the ground floor and the parapet up top. And the last drawing on the right is our proposal of the triple pediment composition to honor Robertson's intention with a full-scale, as faithful as possible restoration of the ground floor, restoration of the body, and our rooftop addition. The middle photograph on the bottom shows some delicate window mutton tracery that existed on the 6th floor that we plan to recreate. All the windows, by the way, are proposed to be painted wood windows to match the historic conditions. There's window details in the appendix of the presentation. On the bottom right, you see a series of photographs. The historic photographs of the ground floor are quite high res, and they've allowed us to really dig in and detail these pedimented portals and window tracery to a great degree, as well as working with our lighting designer who's sourcing
the appropriate lanterns that you can see sitting on the cheek wall on the lower right photograph. The cheek walls that were the guardrails for the stairs that one stepped up to the ground floor. You can also see right next to that, to the left in the photograph, is a recessed stone panel that we think had a coat of arms of the Vanderbilts. That is the location that we are proposing the single sign for the hotel. Seen from the side, the existing condition and the proposed ground floor restoration, we are lowering the ground floor to grade. So there is no need for stairs at the front doors, and thus the cheek walls are proposed to only encroach onto the sidewalk 42 inches, as opposed to the historic condition, which encroached about 6 feet. Otherwise, the only deviation from the historic condition of the ground floor in the restoration is the use of granite for anything that's touching the sidewalk. In other words, at the cheek walls, the bases of the columns, and the base of the building below the windows is proposed to be a granite. There's some samples here. This is rock-faced lilac sandstone that we sourced from a quarry in Mississauga, Ontario, that closely matches the sandstone of the building. There's a chip here too. There's to the left of the facade on the ground floor, to the right of the window, the door on the left, is some code-required storm tank overflow vents, air vents. In the middle, you see a Siamese connection, and on the right, near the right side door, is two more small vents that we need to incorporate into the facade. Otherwise, it's, again, painted wood windows, reflecting the historic pattern. And where the coat of arms was, historically, we show a single sign that has a backdrop of smooth sandstone with a raised stone trim. The portals are slightly asymmetric, as Harry mentioned. The one on the left, the eastern portal, is slightly smaller, and it's proposed to be the restaurant and service entrance, while the one on the right is slightly bigger and seen as the hotel entrance. So now, just a second, back to the Robertson drawing. We only have a copy, we don't even have a paper copy, we have a digitized photograph of the drawing. So when we zoom in, I think it's quite pixelated, but you see Robertson's intention of a 7th floor that in the center, under a gable, is an extrusion of the street wall, and 2 wings, one to the east, one to the west, that are slightly recessed. And you can tell that by the fragment section that survives on the left side of the drawing. It was important to us to note that Robertson proposed to eliminate the parapet, both in the original design that you see here, and this is the repeat of the original design when we went back to the building department for the second time to ask for this extension. But that parapet has been existing 130 years, and it's in good condition. It's quite beautiful. So our proposal drapes a panelized, perforated metal screen in front of the parapet, does not touch the parapet. It's hung from brackets that are projecting from the structural mullions of the glass wall behind the parapet. So in other words, from the front face of the gable screen to the glass behind is 2 foot 9 inches. So in a way, we're incorporating the parapet into a facade assembly that's over 3 feet thick when you include the mullions that are holding the glass behind. That's in the center section at the gable, where the street wall is meant, or was intended to be an extrusion into the 7th floor and pediment. The eastern and western wings set back slightly per Robertson's intention. The screen is still not touching the parapet. It's 2 inches behind the parapet in that case, whereas it's 2 inches in front of the parapet in the center gable. It's in front of the glass system is consistently behind the parapet and 10 inches behind the parapet. We'll talk more about the screen and the whole system in a second, but to diagram what you just saw, on the left is the parapet, the existing parapet in that kind of salmon color. A glass wall enclosure for the building, for the addition, is set 10 inches behind the parapet. That's blue. And then the drawing on the right, the green, is the screen system, perforated, panelized screen system that's hung from brackets that are projecting from the mullions of the glass system behind. It's 2 inches in front of the parapet at the gable and 2 inches behind the parapet at the wings. The perforated screen system slides up the sloped roofs to the extent of Robertson's previous elevation. Variations of the system have been done both locally and elsewhere. The upper left is the Brooklyn Navy Yards. It uses a perforated metal screen to evoke a historic photo of the yards. Below that is a museum in Germany where a stamped metal panel perforated evoke rough stone. In the middle photograph is a police station in France that uses voids and solids in a metal screen in front of glass, panelized in a similar way we're doing to evoke landscape. So in a way, we are doing a hybrid of all three. The screen is meant to be perforated. We're evoking a historic drawing, the Robertson drawing. We are proposing to stamp it in a similar three-dimensional way as the German panels. This is a month's metal sample. This is full scale of the perforations of our design. If I'll put it here, touch it, pass it around. It's proposed to be stamped in the same kind of manner that the German panels were to evoke a texture of rough stone. That's not the material of the color, but this is the material and the color. It's meant to have that kind of weight. That's full scale sample.
And the way that sample returns on the edges is the way the panels will be built.
Right. We'll show some details showing what Harry's saying. It's a return for the panelized system, much like what you see there. It returns at the corners of the gable 2 feet, but the whole thing, the whole system is seen as a 3 foot 3 inch thick assembly that incorporates the historic parapet. So this is a sheet of other influences. The upper left, the historic drawing, drawn in the late 19th century. So that period was underscored by many things, including not least of which, the Industrial Revolution, which really fueled Ladies Mile, the growth of Ladies Mile, via inventions such as the sewing machine. The sewing machine allowed the creation of machine-made lace and embroidery to be attached to fashion. It was also the era of Impressionism. But you can imagine the women that were living in the Margaret Louisa home working in such environments and creating such textiles. There's also the era of mathematical theories such as Georgie Voronoi, who created a way to rationalize patterns found in nature. So just as the sewing machine created the illusion of handmade craft, the Voronoi simulation would rationalized patterns found in nature. We applied the Voronoi simulation to our drawing. The drawing on the lower left is a photograph, actually, of the granular composition of sandstone, and the Voronoi simulation next to it is his simulation using his theory of random pattern shown in that granular composition. We use that same theory attached to the pixelated drawing that we had to create our lace-like screen, detail of which is on the lower right. When one zooms out and standing in front of the building across the street, directly across, straight on view, the screen evokes the drawing with the wings that are set back. You also see the ground floor and the complete triple pediment composition of Robertson's original intention. Just a second for other uses of that same system from the world. The second, the two on the left are from Japan, and the one on the right is another view of the French police station. But it explains a little bit about that interstitial space between the screen and the mullions of the glass system, brackets that project from the glass system that hold and hang the screen system. So you see there are literal holes, window-sized holes where Robertson proposed double-hung windows, as well as the attic windows above as well.
What we're seeing in your rendering through those holes is the glass surface set 3 or so feet.
Correct. When one sees it from an angle from the street, it takes on more of an abstract composition. But you also begin to really appreciate the three-dimensional quality of the turned edges, not just at the ends of the gable, but at those apertures of the double-hung windows that Robertson proposed. We are turning the panels in much deeper than that 2 inches. The 2 inches is the typical panel that you don't really perceive ever, but at the windows, it projects 6 inches, it turns in 6 inches to kind of give that same feeling as the deeper cuts of the masonry wall below. We got a series of visibility studies, the existing condition on the left, on the right, the side wall, following Robertson's profile, and then you can straighten out. The proposal also includes the extension of the chimney to rise above our new side wall. The plan is to salvage the great sandstone detail at the top of that chimney and put it on top of the extended chimney. At night,
What's happening to the cornice on the building to the left there?
Oh, okay. Good question. Thank you for noting that. We are proposing to trim the cornice of the neighbor building. The neighbor building's cornice returns 5 feet 5 inches into our property, to the south of the property, and we're cutting it and restoring. We're going to restore that parapet, the cornice. There are photographs in the appendix of the presentation in the way back. There's a sheet about that, trimming of that piece, showing it in elevation and a detailed photograph of the existing condition. So it's encroaching on our property, and we're trimming it back, allowing it to breathe just enough so our slope roof can nestle in below it.
But it looks like you have some distance between it and the slope roof.
And it's been encroaching for decades.
I don't disagree. That image just implied that. I think in the back, the appendix shows maybe a better, a more accurate distance that we feel like we need to trim it, but for certain, if we don't need to trim it, we did not want to trim it at all. It happens to be in not great condition, so there is a center bracket that actually we are planning to keep. So that's actually not quite right, that rendering. There's a center bracket out of return that we are keeping. That's a good 3 feet deep. I think this is just, we didn't catch up and didn't focus on that little detailed rendering, but thank you for pointing that out. I think in the back, in the presentation, the appendix, maybe we'll find page number first later, we show the actual length that we're planning to trim. It's actually less of a cut than that's what we're showing there.
Before we leave the front facade, in the original design, I believe there was no middle pillar at the ground floor. That was just windows entirely, or no?
No, this is a restoration of the ground floor in the historic condition. You can see the photograph from 1907 and 1934 showing stone. Oddly below a window, but there is a stone pillar where we're proposing it. It is a little weird that it's centered. It's not the structure of the building, weirdly enough, that the structure of the building is behind it, the masonry wall, and even our new columns don't follow that center column, that center pillar, but that is the historic pattern of the ground floor stone work. At night, the screen really takes on the almost literally the image of the drawing. because now it's a reverse, kind of an X-ray. We're working with our lighting designer, and there's some specs of actual lighting fixtures in the back of the presentation. I think literally the last page or two of the presentation show the specs of some LED lights that we are planning to put in between or part of the screen system to illuminate from the inside. The screen system also wraps up the slope roof a bit and is stood off the actual enclosure of the roof system to allow for some lighting and some and weather to drain. So it's actually a true rain screen. Anything that's screened is a true rain screen system. Again, at night as well, turning the corner, looking at it obliquely, it feels more abstract. The use of the screen at night shown as they did at the American Museum of African Americans History and Culture, recently completed in DC. Otherwise, the lighting program the idea is to illuminate the arches, the three-story arches of the stone facade, and not project outward, but only project on the return to the stonework and be a light glowing top. So as opposed to anything that's really a lighthouse for the neighborhood, the ground floor, subtle lighting on the ground floor entries. The mock-up was actually really gratifying to see this view of the mock-up. It really felt that it did the Robertson drawing quite an honor and fit snugly into its context. From in front as well, it sits back next to the shoulders of the wings, respect the parapet especially. From the side, this is from the west now. Our western neighbor is smaller, you see more of the sidewall. I've seen that view, but the mock-up as well. And we're going to zoom into that, stepping farther back west, farther and farther west. A little blue on the key plan shows that there's a dark blue and a light blue, and then the red and the orange. So the orange is our new proposal, as well as the blue and dark blue. One can imagine if the Robertson proposal was built, it would end at about that orange dotted line. So we're only saying that the visibility of something above that line is a little more limited than the visibility of the entire proposal. Moving back farther west. Now on 15th Street, you do see our 7th and 8th floor are peeking out here. The two windows are existing condition of the neighbor. Those two windows exist now. That's the neighbor's back. This is our 7th and 8th floor. The fenestration pattern being paired double-hung windows, characteristic of the neighborhood. The brick of that facade meaning to blend in with the background tapestry of the kind of reddish-brown brick of the area. This is the more reddish brick that we're proposing for the 16th Street visible sidewall. When seen directly from in front of the 15th Street building, one sees our 8th floor. The top of our 8th floor, the rear, top of our 8th floor. Quickly, just the plans, as Gary said, it's proposed as a hotel, about 60 to 80 key hotel with restaurant on the ground floor. And then quickly zooming in on that parapet and the screen that is draped in front of it, projecting from, draped and hung from projecting brackets from the glass wall behind. With the detail of that on the right and detailed plan section on the left. But the entire thing from face of screen to glass face is 2'9". When you include the 6-inch, plus or minus 6-inch mullion, it's 3'3" depth of facade assembly that's incorporating that parapet. Not touching the parapet. We do reach on occasion, not always, but on occasion, some of the arches of the parapet receive a bracket through it, but not touching it. The view from the inside, that illustrates that concept. The parapet becoming part of the room in a way, and seeing the inside of the facade screen. And then wrapping up, just the statistics of the street wall, matching the historic and proposed height of 96.6 to the top of the gable. And then our 8th floor and 9th floor, which are set back, plus mechanical, screen mechanical equipment for on top of the bulkhead, for a maximum height on top of the bulkhead, screen equipment of 120 feet 11 inches.
So does let's go back for a second. The vertical, the surface that is shown in white, the left and right of the pediment, that is not part of the recessed vertical wall at the 8th floor terrace. Is that covered with the mesh as well?
It is covered with the mesh to the top of those terrace cutouts. So it would be right there, that line. Which
right. So everything from there down, except including the cutouts, is covered with the mesh. But from there up, it's metal.
Correct.
Yeah. So that's not visible.
But not visible.
Got it. Okay.
And just a question, a detail question. The panels of the screen are, you're drawing for about 3 feet plus or minus 5, 7 to 9 feet.
Correct.
Is that a choice, or are these sizes that it comes in, and what will those seams read as?
So the dimension of panels was based on both looking at Robertson's drawings and figuring out a nice proportional match, as well as the material limitations of the Munson metal, or any metal for that matter. The sheets are only so big. It tends to be a 9 to 12 foot maximum sheet size, and the windows, the cut aperture of the windows, the Robertson windows happen to be 3 feet. So that was the rhythm. And then the gaps between the panels are a ½ inch. So as opposed to some of those precedents that had kind of a white edge to all the panels, we won't have that because that's literally the edge of our panel. Our panel bends the perforated material and the frame is set behind it. So what's seen is that cut edge and not a frame in front. And with a ½ inch gap, which will appear dark.
In a design exploration like this, with any number of smaller and larger aha moments, in the first informal meeting with Landmark staff, we were challenged to say how this would hold up and whether it was as insubstantial as the idea of the screen. And when we saw that we could bend it and have the perforations actually around the corner, we thought we can celebrate the gaps rather than act as if they were a constraint that we didn't wish. So this construction reveals this solidity and depth at the same time as lighting the ethereal as a drawing.
And the back experiences.
You mentioned, I think in reference to page 34, 35, that there was an assumed from the side view height of what the Robertson sort of the edge of the additional floor would have been. I don't know where you get that sort of previous. Yeah. What makes you think that the pediment didn't go back? Wasn't envisioned going back as a kind of just a pitched roof all the way back? I mean, where do you get that?
We don't know.
Yeah.
We don't know. This is pure speculation, taking the Robertson drawing at face value, the height of his sloped roofs that he was showing at frontally. We don't have any other documents, unfortunately, of his proposal. So we just drew that dotted red line at that height. But yes, it could have been higher. He could have set back more. It could have kept sloping in different ways. We don't know.
Yeah, it could have been stage set. He wasn't on the 15th Street YWCA when he had a hip roof there. It was a fully used attic floor.
Okay. Thank you.
One question, in the gable, how many floors do you have in the gable?
2.
2.
Well, there's one on the 7th floor is not in the pediment. The pediment itself says 1 floor.
Do you have a section through the gable?
Oops, sorry. So the section on the right guest room 11, GR11, is on the 7th floor, or 711, room 711 is on the 7th floor, and that corresponds to the elevation to the left. The pediment is seen as one room that's actually part of the bigger suite on that floor. So that's the suite on that floor enjoys multiple orientations.
Does it have the gable?
It can have a, yes, it can. It's drawn, the way it's drawn here, the 13.6 or 13.8 dimensions, like, but that's to the top of the peak of the gable. So yes, that could be like a cathedral ceiling room inside the pediment. Terrific.
Questions? Other questions? Okay, we have some testimony. I think come back and continue the questions. So, we can remind everybody who has 3 minutes to speak. And then we're going to start with Trevor Stahelski.
Trevor Stahelski, reading a letter from Barry Benefi, dated January 6th to Ms. Sarah Carroll. I'm writing to support the proposed alteration by DKSK Architects for the facade of the historic R.H. Robinson building. Historic district at 16 East 60th, half block west of Union Square. The firm was asked to insert a 9-story hotel in the center of this block, which would incorporate the 19th century Romanesque facade with a horizontal stone parapet. Upon researching BKSK, I discovered Robertson's original design for missing pediment doorways at the ground floor. BKSK have adopted both these designs in their proposals. The proposed entrances and windows on the ground floor will be replicated in sandstone to be mined in Mississauga, Ontario. The top floor will be another matter, a daring reach from heavy stone into lightweight theatrics. Here, the gable will be constructed of Muntz metal, made in Germany, to slip over a glass wall enclosing the guest rooms behind. Under daylight conditions, the exterior will have the appearance of sandstone. At night, it will have the texture of embroidered lace. One is reminded of Arthur Miller's production of Death of a Salesman on Broadway, where Willie was seen in his home behind a screen of painted architecture. There's also the touch of whimsy that one finds in the Woolworth building by Cascadeward, or the stylized carvings of the Chrysler. There is little doubt that this new roof and gable wall are not conventional in the architectural sense. They are theatrical, but strong, durable, nevertheless. Much of architecture is about theater, about the excitement of exterior street space, as well as the comfort of enclosed space. While stepping down the hotel's top floor of the existing balustrade or a brazenly modern gable are doable alternatives. This solution is thoroughly engaging. It is certainly worthy of your approval and will undoubtedly lead to some basic conversations about architecture consistent. BKSK has already demonstrated their sensitivity in incorporating a contemporary vernacular with historic fabric and the elegant dome added to Tammany Hall at Union Square. They have achieved an even more elegant solution to 16 East 16th Street. I urge you to approve. Most sincerely, Barry.
Thank you. Terry Mills.
Hello. Good morning. I'm Terry Mills, and I will be reading on behalf of Sylvia Smith from FX Collaborative. Dear Ms. Carroll, our office moved to West 19th, the heart of what is now the Ladies Mile Historic District, in 1896. We experienced the revitalization of the area and value its rich visual character and social history. A favorite pastime is walking the neighborhood and noting the changes over time. What enhances the context, what distracts and what diminishes. I often focus on storefronts and roof lines. Therefore, I have particular interest in BKSK's proposed alterations of 16th East 16th Street, a building I regularly experience on my way to Union Square. Having studied the proposal, I write in its support. Renewing R.H. Robertson's strong rusticated sandstone base and gabled, now accessible entries knits the back into the original composition of the 16th Street facade. The removal and replacement of the 1951 modification of the building base and intrusive ramp are obvious improvements to the street level experience. The premise for the proposed rooftop expansion is more conceptually intriguing, the reimagining of an intended design that was not built. Robertson's proposed 7-story enclosed by a peaked roof and center gable express residential use of the Margaret Louisa home and completed the facade composition. Ironically, it's prohibited due to building regulations for lodging houses. While the open balustrade terminates the facade, something is missing. BKSK's remembrance of Robertson's original intention completes the facade, adding 3-dimensional richness as it accommodates the new hotel use. The mock-up illustrates the strength and the central gable in the street wall. BKSK's proposed design reflects a cohesive logic that connects the original intent and context with the modern condition. The past is connected to the contemporary in a way that honors and respects both. This is an appropriate way to celebrate the building and incorporate an updated use as it enhances the visual character of our neighborhood. Thank you.
Jennifer Falk.
Good morning to everyone at the Landmarks Committee. My name is Jennifer Falk, and I'm the Executive Director of the Union Square Partnership. I thank you for your time today as you consider 16 East 16th Street's application for appropriateness, and on behalf of the Union Square Partnership, I urge you to support this proposal. As many of you know, the Union Square Partnership is a community-based nonprofit organization, also known as a BID. We have many programs, which I won't list for you, and we invest in the beautification and maintenance of Union Square Park, the district's crown jewel. While the site under consideration is not currently within the BID's boundaries, it is technically two lots outside of our district. I am here today as a community ally of this thoughtful proposal. The design as envisioned by BKSK architects reflects a considered approach to historic preservation. The proposal balances careful attention to the building's history while addressing the unmet capacity for today's hotel market in the district. An intimate hotel, as the one proposed today, offers a counter-narrative to the large-scale, multinational corporate hotel chains that have dominated the expansion of the hospitality industry in the city. Moreover, the location of a smaller hotel that embraces the site's historic character might serve as a model for future contextual adaptations in the sector. This proposal is also of the same caliber of projects that other historic adaptations in the neighborhood, as well as the well-received reimagining of Tammany Hall, which is at 44 Union Square East, which also happened to have been conceived by BKSK architects. And to be honest, if BKSK architects could do every single readaptation and reimagining of every historic building in Union Square, I'd be unbelievably happy. In addition, the inclusion of a restaurant on the hotel's plans will allow the public to enter the facility and appreciate the elements of the historic structure that are presently inaccessible to the public. Union Square holds an integral place in urban history and an architectural heritage in the city of New York. We believe this proposal respects that history, and the proposal of 16 East 16th Street has the full support of the Union Square Partnership, and we believe merits the Commission's approval. We thank you for your time and letting us share our perspective. Thank you very much.
You want anything below?
Hi, my name is Yan-Ping Lo. I'm the East Territory Administrator of Soga Gakkai International USA, also known as SGI USA, whose New York office and culture center is located at 70 East 15th Street, abutting the south side of the property at 16 East 16th Street, under consideration today. SGI USA supports, in principle, Ramsey Park House LLC, desires to develop the property at 16 East 16th Street and construct a new hotel. SGI USA full support, however, is conditioned upon the receipt and review of all proposed plans to assess the impact of planned construction, demolition, and excavation on the SGI USA neighboring property. To tell you a bit about our organization, SGI USA is the most diverse Buddhist community in the United States, with more than 500 chapters and some hundreds centers throughout the country. And based on the core Buddhist principle, such as respecting the dignity of human life and the interconnectedness of self and environment, SGI engaged in various peace activities, including human rights education, the movement to abolish nuclear weapons, and effort to promote sustainable development. I hereby today to represent SGI USA and provide its conditional support for Ramsey Park LLC proposal to redevelop 16 East 16th Street. Both our property has stood in dialogue for over a century as they share an architect, Robert H. Robertson. Complementing the Romanesque revival's facade and originally functions serving the emergent 16th century female workforce. They were at one time connected via a corridor when the building at 16 East 16th Street was a ladies' grooming house, and the SGI USA building was the first Young Women's Christian Association building. Both of these structures has undergone many interior alterations while maintaining the impressive Victorian frontage. Although the property at 16 East 16th Street had incurred street-level alteration, it needs of a careful restoration to which the property owner has committed. We are also in favor of the sculptural realization of the Robert H. Robertson wish for the building top story. As a believer in lifelong learning, we value this proposal as it invites New Yorkers and visitors to pause and engage in the structural history, while appreciating the artistic proposition by reviewing which was once concealed in the blueprint and design honors Robert H. Robertson's legacy. While building shared walls, together we are part of a wider, interconnected historic district. Every measure that the city can take to bring the public attention to the rich, diverse history of each building that makes up this neighborhood elevates the mission of the designating such a district as unique and important to our collective history. For these reasons, we do not object Ramsey Park LLC proposal. However, as I state in the outspot, we support and will need a careful review. So thank you so much for your time.
Thank you. Brittany, comments?
Greene Thomas, representing the Historic Districts Council. HDC applauds the proposed alterations at the ground floor and the restoration of the existing primary facade. The choice to use quality materials is a commendable one, and we're happy to see that the applicant went in this appropriate direction. However, the proposed gable rooftop addition and glass screen enclosure do not serve this elegant muscular building well and unnecessarily detract and distract from it. While we certainly understand the inspiration drawn from R.H. Robertson's original design, the fact remains that his design eventually changed, and this was never an existing historic feature of this robust building. Any significant modern interventions to the facade must properly befit the structure that was ultimately built, or should not be done at all. HGC suggests the applicant further set back the enlarged section at the rear of the roof without the gable rooftop addition. Thank you.
Thank you. Christabel Dahl?
Christabel Dahl for the Society for the Architecture of the City, and we support this application. Reversing the alteration of the base, removing the slabs of glitter-colored marble, and returning to the original style and material is a substantial gain for the building and the block. Unlike some recent incursions, the architects have been able to accommodate the program without producing an intrusive massing. Robertson was known for his picturesque contributions to what was then the skyline of New York, particularly in the McIntyre building nearby. The new top floor is a ghost of a ghost, based apparently on the rejected proposal, It is shrouded in enough material. This is an experiment we find generally permissible, although the online presentation we saw seemed more exploratory than specific. It probably has the potential of creating a visual harmony through small-scale detailing and an engagement with light and shade effects parallel to Robertson's own design concerns.
Thank you. Andrea Cole.
Good day, Chair Carroll and Commissioners. I'm Andrea Goldman, speaking on behalf of the New York Landmarks Conservancy. This attractive Romanesque revival-style building, designed by R.H. Robertson and built in 1889-91, has fallen on some hard times. Unused for several years, makes substantial unsympathetic alterations to the interior and front facade ground floor. We support the intent of this proposal to restore and adapt the property for hotel use. The proposed restoration work at the existing front facade is impressive. Plans to recreate the ground floor to match the historic appearance and facilitate ADA accessibility are commendable. They will re-engage the public with this grand historic structure. We do not oppose the large addition at the mid-block, which should serve to make the project economically feasible, but we echo the Commissioner's concerns regarding removal of the neighboring cornice. At the proposed gable, the architects have made the argument that Robertson's unrealized design should be inspiration for a new gable. We don't object to a new gable, but we're not convinced that the metal mesh is appropriate at this location. It will be highly visible and will certainly draw attention away from this exemplary restoration. We're not asking that a new gable replicate the historic design, but we hope that the Commission can guide the architects to a scheme more complementary to this landmark. Thank you.
Thank you. Margot Lorea.
I've been part of the community for over 20 years. I am the owner, operator of Tocqueville Restaurant and 15 East Restaurant on 15th Street. I've been here prior to asking for your permission to do my renovations in my buildings. I certainly appreciate the work that the Landmarks Commission does for the neighborhood. And I would like to express that I think this is a great opportunity for the neighborhood to improve 16th Street, beautify our neighborhood, and it's a win-win for all of us, for the Landmarks Commission, for the neighborhood, for Union Square. And in short, I'd like to express my support towards the proposed project. I will be looking for the Landmarks guidance as far as the architecture. I'm not an architect, although I have an opinion about it. I think it looks terrific, and looking forward to having the project materialize in the neighborhood. Thank you very much.
Thank you. William McIntosh.
Hello, I'm William McIntosh, and I think I'm in the minority in that I'm probably the only person who actually lives on this block and lives in the neighborhood. And I oppose the application, not on the terms of the appropriateness of the design. I think that's irrelevant. I think it's on the appropriateness of the proposal. It seems to me that the owners bought the wrong building. They bought a historic building in a historic district, and they are asking you to make compromises and do backflips in order to make it economically viable. Bottom line, that's it. I won't even get into the aesthetics of it. I'm a designer. I've been a designer for 40 years. We all propose things. They don't always get built. The original architect, he got his building and decided to make an addition to it. Didn't have to work out for him. I don't think it's our or your responsibility to realize this never realized design. But again, to me, it doesn't seem to be a question of, although living on the block, I have to say, and if you've ever had the opportunity to walk down the block, It's a quiet little block. This thing seems very showy to me. It seems like a little bit more appropriate for a more midtown location or something on a major avenue. And so to that I will say. But again, to me it seems like it's a question of the proposal, the application of this building. It's just the wrong building. Sorry, it's not big enough. And I'll leave it at that. Thank you.
Thank you. Is there anyone else who'd like to speak on this application? Okay. And we do have a resolution from Community Board 5 recommending denial of the application. Do you want to respond to some of the comments?
I thought we would go to 661.
So we're happy to keep as much of that encouragement in cornice, neighboring cornice as possible. But this is just to illustrate what we felt that we needed to do, just to, at least during construction, was because the slope of the wings could nestle in and might maybe reconstruct the cornice later to allow that. But right now we're proposing to say 4'4" in from the top. And including the center bracket that's here.
Otherwise, I think that was a measured difference of opinion. We don't really feel the need to rebut anything.
Are there any more questions for the hearing? Okay, let's have a motion to close the hearing.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Okay, so the interesting project, that we reused with some restoration and expansion of that roof, and taking rather than a setback and using for approach, taking a statement approach that we folks, the drawings was found and was never built. So thoughts on that? I think it's an interesting philosophical discussion for us to have. Start, Ronnie?
Sure. So I think you're right. It's interesting. As Christopher Duff said, ghost and a ghost of a proposal. I think it is interesting. As another member of the public said, it's not our responsibility to build it. I think that's true. This, in as much as we have a responsibility to preserve fragments and things from the past. This may not be, this drawing and its sort of intention may not be something that we need to be doing, but I think it is really an interesting idea to grow the building sort of within the confines of what was suggested in the architect's drawings. But it's because of that that I think while the front and the scrim or the glass and the slightly overly complicated, I think, dappling fabric, but in any event, this kind of more diaphanous material for the structure is interesting and appropriate. I think that as it turns its corner, what it is that we see from the Union Square side is less convincing. I think that that starts to be a kind of express the sort of the greed, the bottom lines, the need of the development to make sense of itself. And it would be cleaner as an idea and as an extension of the kind of the idea for the triangular, the pediment piece to actually maybe move, sort of extrude back into the center block only, and for us not to read the volume of the interior coming to the edge of the side wall. So that's where I would start.
This is an interesting project. I was just like, my mind always tries to figure out what the projects that the commission is there aren't a lot that I can think of. There are a few, and the Hearst building is the one that springs to mind. But there aren't a whole lot of them that would fall into the category of speculative completions as opposed to restorations or reconstructions of things that were actually there. But you know, that took a very clear approach, right? I mean, the Hearst building was like, all right, there was supposed to be a tower. This was always a base, so let's put a tower on it. But that tower will be very modern and not relate to the Doric column that was originally proposed or something. So I mean, here, the other preoccupation that I have is that I think that as architects, we become sometimes seduced or rely too heavily upon the narratives we create to bolster our designs. And those tend to buoy us through the process. And at a certain point, you've got to kind of step back, or I try to step back and say, how much can a typical viewer read of my story, and how much is the design's integrity dependent on that story? And if I took away that story and just looked at the thing as a thing, without the explanation, what would I think? And that's what I kind of think that I have difficulty with this scheme. Because when I think about it, in reality, I think about what it's going to look like. I think that, first of all, the pattern that serves as the echo, the ghost of the design joint will have much less visual presence than will the joints between the panels and the tubes behind the panels and the brackets behind the panels and the metal framing of the storefront or the curtain wall that will exist behind the panels. So that's number one. Number two, I try to look at the proportions and the kind of quality of the perforated metal object that is at the top of the building, opposed to the top of the building, and I say to myself, from a proportional point of view, it just doesn't seem to stand on its own, because it wants both to be an addition to the building below, a kind of continuous extension of the building below, as was the intent of Robertson, and also to float on top of it, kind of like many of the other rooftop additions we've seen. And the analogy that I think of is the glass block thing that Terry Despont proposed down in Tribeca, where it was kind of a vertical extension in language of the building below, but in a modern material. You know, here, the flatness of the material, the fadedness, the muddiness of the image, and the proportions of the resultant volume to me seem, I don't know, they just don't seem to come together. I think that what would have made the vertical extension as in sandstones satisfying is its relation in material and depth and shadow to the structure below it. If you look at the perforated, Morris actually did a perforated, if I'm not mistaken, design for a building in the Ladies Mile Historic District, basically taking a kind of classic Ladies Mile vertical mid-block building and rendering it in perforated metal, if I'm not mistaken. And it was very detailed in the three-dimensionality of the perforated pieces. And I think that goes to explain perhaps why that worked. Because you weren't relying on the cartoon of the building on a two-dimensional surface. You were using light and shadow, but instead of terracotta or brick, you were using metal material. So I think that there's something about the intersection between the materiality and the intention that just isn't working for me. I don't have the difficulty seeing the mass that Adi had. I think that it kind of is seen in oblique, but I do think that cornice should be completely sacrosanct and not touched. I think that the view from 15th Street is acceptable and reasonable, and I think that the facade work is great. I would just ask that the applicant work with the staff. The model, the renderings looked a little bit blocky and diagrammatic if their intention is to be restorative, then they should be looking at doing it to the level of detail that the rest of the building is rendered to. I also would suggest that, I'm not sure what the right answer is with those cheek walls to the side of the entrance, but they strike me as a bit high. I know they were put back in order to replace what was there, but they're not replacing what was there. They were in granite, not in sandstone, and they're also not at a stoop. They're at a flat entrance. So I think that the relationship between the ground plane and the top of the cheek wall might merit good, might be enough to make that the governor and make the columns longer as opposed to vice versa.
I agree with Avi's comments and with some of Michael's. First, just the 15th Street side, I don't really have a problem with that. I actually, I do like the approach of trying to create the ghost of the original design, the architect. I think it's a good charting idea that does work as a concept. What is bothering me is the massing, I think, on the side, and the kind of odd configuration that emerges as you move further away from the building. By the time you get to 140 or 200 feet, you see a kind of jagged, even if you could tolerate some of the massing there, it's an irregular massing, which to me is, first, the size of massing when you're closer in seems to be looming over the front of the building and drawing attention away from it, and then as you get farther on, it's not regular, so it's disruptive and sort of odd. It's maybe there are ways to approach that, but that's my principal problem is, yes, with how the ghost kind of turns the corner there and meets the new mass, the additional massing that's, it doesn't seem like it's part of the design exactly, so we kind of took some between on that. It's not clear how the addition is fitting in, and it seems to me to be a little overpowering and needs to be removed or go back or integrate in some fashion with the new ghost, so to speak.
Very interesting presentation, of course, and concept. First of all, just that whole idea of taking this somewhat derelict building and making it into a talents district is a wonderful idea. And the big picture. Also, big picture, an awful lot of demolition. Most of it not visible from the street, but I just note that there's a whole lot of demolition to the point where we're really left with a sign, I think we just have to ponder that issue. I'm not sure I'm against it in this case, but I think it's important for the commission to think about that. So therefore, getting down to the part of the matter, which is before us in this picture, my mind kept going back and forth. I certainly like contemporary use of materials in its day, and so first I was immediately, well, this is a wonderful idea. Not because it isn't. But then there was so much emphasis on the detailing of it and the connections, and I thought, couldn't they just do it out of sandstone and be done with it? And then I thought, well, no, that's not right, because the building was built 125 years ago. Why shouldn't we use a more contemporary approach? And it is, I guess, something that's higher. On the other hand, there's a wonderful the parapet, wonderful as it is, I guess is not completely, you can't create the two together, and I think the architects have done a really credible job of thinking that through, but yet, with my Michael had said, I think the parapet should be sacrosanct. There's something pretty wonderful about the parapet.
What about the cornice on the blue cornice?
Oh, you were talking about that? Okay. No, I'm talking about the continuous parapet on our building. So I guess there's an incompatibility with keeping that intact and also replicating the original idea of it. So I don't have a solution to that. I'm just noting that it's a difficult design problem. So, the restoration of the base. Along my own, what I just said about the philosophy of the top, this is the right thing to do for the bottom, it seems to me, restoring it with real material, with the caveats that have been mentioned already in terms of some of the details, which I accept. I think that's the correct thing to do. So where does it all leave me? I mean, I'm really intrigued. I really think I like it. I think I'm just a little nervous about eliminating so much of the building. I want to be sure that we're doing the right thing when we do that. There is that little back room, really, which is all that would be left, I think, more or less of what you might see and appreciate. But at least we did that. So maybe I'll leave it at that. I'm sort of drifting toward Marshall approval.
Well, it's very intriguing. I really appreciate the concept behind it and understand the desire to want to take that drawing and use it as the inspiration. And I think it does work on some levels, but I'm troubled by the fact that the screen covers the parapet. And I think that we could have sort of a screening effect if we were behind the parapet. It might help it read as, more clearly read as a modern intervention. I think it's going to be that way. I think the way the screen just sort of wraps around everything at the penthouse level is also a little troubling. I feel like maybe it wants to just be the face of the table or have some kind of detail, but it's sort of it's like apply a little bit like wallpaper. And I'm wondering how that's going to read. I think you are going to need a lot of the support behind it and the brackets, and I just don't know if it's going to look the way it does in the renderings. It may be distracting to have all that structure holding it up. Where the other samples that they show are really just basically screens, vertical screens. So, and maybe a little more definition of how the panels are constructed. But I think in concept it's really interesting. I think it could be appropriate.
I guess there are two really fundamental issues. One is this notion that we're going to realize this unrealized scheme. I very much appreciate Commissioner Goldblum's comment. How much can a typical viewer read my story? Can it be read at all? And how much of the story is in my head? Although there's probably a great Pink Floyd lyric in there somewhere. I don't have to do what Michael has to do, which is take off his architect hat. I'm not one. And I'm stuck between that notion of the story and Commissioner Bland's comment about the sandstone, which is to say, we're very rarely confronted with the question of an unrealized design. And so when we talk about trying to put on something that looks like the original building, we're talking about dropping an extension, something on top of the building, something that we say, well, don't fake it, right? Make it modern, make it new, make it look like it's different. Here, the justification for it is that it was there, or with even the architect had. So I wouldn't mind if it actually was, they actually did it in sandstone or whatever, material. So it's a different kind of question, I think, than the usual type of structure being dropped on top of the building. So I'm not a fan of this image of that structure. But you know, if it was done in sandstone, it gives them the opportunity to achieve everything they want to do in terms of space, that's for sure. The second issue is the one that, another one that Fred raised, which is really disturbing to me, which is the notion that we're demolishing the majority of the building. And I'm guessing that, you know, and I may be wrong, but the examples that we saw from their work in London, I would be surprised if London authorities said you can, you know, leave the facade, you've got the rest of the building, take everything out, all the other walls, etc. Maybe they did. I'm surprised. But I don't, it's a very dangerous place for us to go, and we've tiptoed into it on a couple of, I think we'll recall a couple of federal buildings that, federal style buildings that I think we all felt very nervous about, where you end up with just a facade. I don't think that's what we're in the business of doing. I'm not sure that's really ever appropriate for us to say, well, we'll save your, protect your front wall, and it's a viable building is the real difference between this and what we've done in the past, is that we're talking about buildings where the structure was in danger of coming down. So we justified, okay, you can take that out because we have the facade in place. Here we're volunteering to say, to meet whatever your goals are, whether they're economic or not, that's not our purview. We're going to say it's fine to take away the entire thing out of that facade. I think that's a real problem. So, so those two fundamental issues are my concerns. I know I get to the base of the building, the front, the work on the street level, and I think that's all great, subject to the comments about it.
Just a question about that, I do want to just say is that I think we've done it more than we realize. We've done the headlines to table this discussion.
There's creep.
There's been, even when we do in many row houses where we do very high roof competitions, there's really sort of the front wall and the party walls left. And even just like the Otis building that we recently saw in West Chelsea, that was also a similar amount of demolition or adaptive reuse. But I think it's absolutely something we have to consider and really think about the appropriateness of how much is left, and I think that how to address that.
Can we talk about our jurisdiction on that? Are we, and let's say that we as a commission felt, hey, there was too much garden demolition on this, go back to the drawing board. Is that something that we are empowered to say? Sure. Irrespective of visibility and things like that. Right?
So I think we need to think about it, and then the applicant should address it.
I agree with most part of my comments, but I'm not opposed to the gable, the history and now. My issue is essentially the dominance of it on the facade, and from the interior, it's nothing. I would rather see, if they're going to do the gable, make that a dominant space, a dominant room, an important element in the building, as a spatial thing, not just as a facade. And if that became a special room, a larger context, that would be valuable. But to just make it a facade issue and rooms inside of it is a false front is not enough. And enough debate, I think it's fine. I think this one that adds a lot.
I just had a question, Sarah, on the lower, not the new addition, but the building itself, they are retaining the sidewalls as well as the facade. I believe they said in there.
There's portions of it, yeah. There is a courtyard now in the side facade. So the courtyard, new courtyard will be in a different location. This shows. So they keep 45 feet on one side and 86 feet on the other side.
Yeah, I just wanted to clarify that it's not just the facade that they're keeping.
That's right.
But sorry, go back to that. I wasn't aware of about this, are they keeping this part where the roof is intact? That's all been kept.
Oh,
Well, the roof.
well, the roof is got the new
No, I understand, but are the floors behind that, are they being kept as well? Is it all just being gutted back to the
Yeah, okay. So there are many comments that I do agree with. The first is, I do want to say the use. I really appreciate the fact that this use is coming to this area. It is needed, as we've heard from some people who have spoken, and the fact that it's a boutique hotel instead of that fits in with the landscape and the architecture of the area and respects it is important. In terms of I'm just going to address the demolition issue a little bit. There is a way you design and develop hotels, just like there is a way you design and develop office buildings and residential buildings, and I have no idea of whether, how this footprint and room sizes need to lay out relative to the footprint. So, while I think it is something to look at, I certainly can appreciate that sometimes these are difficult, puzzles to figure out when you're laying out these kinds of buildings. With respect to going back to the original, the imagined design, I do have to say that I initially thought conceptually it was a nice idea. And it could be there. I definitely don't think it's necessary. I think the building stands, the building has its own architectural integrity, and it doesn't necessarily need it for the addition. But if it is going to be done, then I agree with many comments, such as the parapet should be sacrosanct, and it should start behind that. And much like the Thierry Dupont and also the AJME example in this presentation, I do feel, and as you said, that it can be something that is a form that is created within that rooftop space, even if it has to grow, so that it seems like it fits in with the building. I sort of, if you go back to, what was that, page 12 that we were on, I keep feeling like that addition is, no, it wasn't 12, it was the other one. It reads almost like it's the facade of a Hollywood set. When you look at it, it's very thin, that's it. So I feel like it needs a little more, needs to be developed further. And I'm sure that whatever uses are in that space, above the parapet, that can be figured out. I do also agree with the comment about the cheek walls at the base. They somehow add bulk there that doesn't seem necessary, and I feel like they could either be shaved off or maybe something has to be built up a little bit. And that's it. I mean, I think this is a project that with some tweaking can be a wonderful addition to the area.
I think the point has been well made. In general, I think talking about an unfulfilled dream, about unrealized design, that so much could have been there, that should have been there, or would love to be brought back. But I think Michael and brought up a good point between the intent. I think there are two ways to look at it. The other way to look at it is between daytime and nighttime. I think if you're going in the evening with the lighting, that two-dimensional pattern in the itself. I do share some of the concern that Fred talked about, which is that at daytime, for somebody just walking by, even with a design background, looking at that pattern, what I see that what the design intent is, even though the architect is a very good designer. So that's one thing. The other thing is I think the neighbors point us as much as possible that that it can be retained, it should be retained, and not damaged or destroyed. As to the base, I think that you have a reference on the original drawing, original photos of the particular type of thing, and Michael's points were taken, but it is proportionally. I know that a lot of people do not want people to sit on the front stoop if it's too low. So I do think that the pediment is a nice idea. I wish it can be created. The question is the intent, the final result, what you intend for, especially in my opinion.
Well, I was hopeful when I saw this, because I just thought, yeah, the Brits know how to do restoration. And then the discussion began. And like Michael, I'm somewhat disturbed when I'm looking at the piece, and my understanding of the piece depends on a verbal narrative. And we had a verbal narrative that lasted an hour that explained to me why this building is being done the way it's being done. And I don't want to have to go through that when I'm walking down 16th Street looking at a building that's historic. And so that's a little troublesome to me. And that has to do, I guess, with the ghost. The ghost that was never realized, the ghost that isn't actually a realization of Robertson's piece. He gave us what we have. It's a BKSK interpretation of what Robertson might have done in absolutely an appropriate set of material, although, you know, I have a little trouble celebrating the holes in a mesh. I don't know if I can ever get there, but for me, that I'm kind of with John and Fred. If you want to do this in sandstone, I'm right on board with you. That said, there is a word that immediately came to mind when I realized the monster that has been put on this site behind what is remaining of the front wall, and that word is facadism. And that is something that I've always been troubled by, and I will remain troubled by. And what is this other than 2 clicks away from facadism? And so I have a major problem with that. I love the adaptive reuse of buildings. Like there was a Mr. McIntosh that testified and said, you know, maybe this is the wrong building for this application. And so I join the ranks of those who are troubled by some of the aspects of this project. I admire the restoration of what will be left, that front facade, but I also agree with Michael. They need to work closely with staff. The renderings show what seems to be almost flat ashlar at the ground level, which in fact in the photograph shows to be rock-faced stone. There are details like that that I think are going to be very important.
Great.
Add something. Michael brought up something that I just want to respond to regarding the story, the development of the storyline, and then the architect gets so involved in creating the storyline and then interpreting the storyline. I myself was a designer and so guilty of this. And I want to quickly respond to it in a way. I think we see a lot of projects here for which I have never expressed an opinion or kind of thought, but I've always felt it, and I never have expressed it. So Michael expressed it very beautifully, I thought, and articulate in a way. But I want to say, in this case, I don't view it that way. I think it's pretty clear what the storyline is. It's no secret interpretation. It simply is a parapet was once thought about. It was never built. Now it's built. To me, it's a very clear storyline. But I think the issue of the storyline is something that we ought to think more about as we look at other. Because, you know, if you need a plaque or if you need to go online and say, if you really want to understand this, Billy, please, you know, go on your phone and you can understand it. That's not right. You know, we ought to be able to appreciate and understand these buildings that are in our cities without a whole lot of private storytelling.
Well, you're getting vice president, so you're right.
Well, I do think here the narrative of realizing that Tom is somewhat straightforward. I think the question that I've heard around the table is the material and the materiality of the detailing and the relationship between the front and facade, and the relationship between the front of the addition and the side of the expansion, both in mass, but also how those materials intersect and the facadism of the addition itself. So I think there's been a kind of an interesting discussion. Generally some openness to realizing the unrealized design, but some real concerns about how you do that and what material you do that and how it's expressed, the materiality, the level of depth, articulation, and all of the details of the connection points.
A couple of things. Thanks for your questions. It sounded to me, if I were sitting in the seats behind me, I might say to myself, hey, screw it, I'll go with the sandstone and call it a day. And I think that merits at least the discussion. And it gets to, for me, the temptation. We all like historic buildings, or else we wouldn't be here. And the notion of having a very beautiful historic top. It reminds me of that hotel in Brooklyn, high-rise district, where they were rebuilding that fantastic, right? You know, oh yeah, you know that's like a home run. Why not? It's a feel-good top 10 hit. But there's a reason why that is considered not a great idea, and what? Whereas in that building, in that hotel, it was. There's a basis because it was there and moved. Here, it was never built. And, you know, we're preserving history, not aesthetics. And even, it's a dangerous thing, you know? It reminds me of people who do brownstone renovations, and they go around fixing all the stuff that was not done right, or, you know, coining it up, or putting moldings where they weren't. They're doing all kinds of stylized corrections, quote unquote. No, I think that part of the history of this building is that he did get permission to do it. And so, you know, if we're going to permit an addition, much as it would be a cup of warm coffee to put on a nice historic top to it, I think there's reason why you should take a pause to it, number one. Number two, I think that we open up a Pandora's box of both good and bad things. Talking about Fred's approach to the bulk and to the quantity of demolition irrespective of visibility. It's a standard that we have not applied, in my recollection, particularly consistently, and it's not a standard that we apply regularly, although we have applied it sometimes. I think if we're going to talk about it, and I think we totally should, I think we should think about what we want, what our standards are, and how we're going to apply them consistently every single time we look at a townhouse. Or you're right, every single townhouse we look at, they rip out all the wood floors, they change the floor, you know. And there's, and I think you're absolutely right, Fred, 1,000%. This building is being more or less gutted. And that should give us pause.
It's not even gutted, it's disappearing.
And if we have the legislative right to consider it, I think we should talk about what we want to consider, how we want to apply that from the scale of the individual building, townhouse, to the scale of a building like this or bigger.
Yeah. So, and I think,
Yeah, I would just also a couple comments. One, I wouldn't want to, like Michael, I would not want to see this just, reconstructed as it was supposed to be built originally. The whole thing that I found appealing about this was the idea that it did preserve the current sense of the building, and that you could see this was going to be a ghost of the architect's idea, which I like. I like that a lot, and I think I'd like to see it to come back in a way that retains that concept. And part of it seems that the ghost wasn't complete. It's an incomplete ghost. That's part of the issue. I think that the architect's vision didn't get articulated in the same way. At least that's the sense we have, where it's being overpowered by the issue. On the other issue, yes, we have approved other things which were largely the facade and the side walls, which is kind of what we're at here. At the same time, I think one of the things we should consider also in that context is a very large site relatively, with a lot of other buildings which were not don't contribute to our sense of landmark. And that, it's, for me, that's kind of alters how I'm looking at the book, because they have to redesign all of that, obviously. And so this becomes part of the whole redesign of the site for me. So I'm looking at it, I think, a little bit differently than mine. It's just the building by itself. But that is what we see is the landmark. Anyway.
yeah.
So just so we're all clear about sort of jurisdiction, there's no doubt we have jurisdiction over the entire site and the entire building. And maybe what a way to frame this, to me it's a little surprising people are articulating a surprise at what is being proposed, because we do it almost every day when we approve rear additions and rooftop additions. Okay, so they're gutting the floors, they're putting a new top on, and they're putting a new rear facade in many cases. Significant. But I think maybe what's changing people's views of this, I think it's very legitimate to be concerned about and ask it, is that this is basically, there's no form left of the historic building. And we're very careful when we're looking at additions to look at form. We want, regardless of what's visible or not, we're trying to figure out, is the form of the building, is that being retained? So we have lower additions and all this other stuff, and we want to see the portions of the rear facade. Because of this site, they are proposing basically, and it really has nothing to do with the form of the historic buildings that were there, and perhaps that's what's sort of getting people thinking about it. But I think, and that's an important difference. And so I think that maybe helps clarify how we think about it.
And even thinking about some of the larger adaptive use, like the Otis project, that the smaller building, which was basically two facades being retained, the new building, which was then coming behind those walls, sort of cantilevered over, even the form was still legible. So that's something to think about. And maybe that's just some of the issues that people have with the side view and the mass. Does it go up, or should it go straight, or what might it have done?
And also all the views are taken from 16th Street, whereas that massing, you would see more from 15th Street. So that all the views are taken from the front. And I think we need to see that how it looks
See it all the way around, yeah. So I think, and I think personally, I also think that there are problems with doing a true restoration. I think there's an honesty question.
I want to be sure that I'm not leaving since I introduced that idea. I'm not for it, that was what was going in my mind. I'm hoping to get this right.
Yeah, unlike Jefferson Street, it didn't exist. And so I think there is this, if you are going to go back and sort of realize this unrealized drawing, I think it can be a demonstration like it was there. But I still think that what I've heard from everybody is that there are, concerns about whether you can do this and what the materiality is. And maybe it's some other way to use sandstone, but not a complete restoration. Maybe it's a grade screen. Maybe it's, I don't know, something that has depth or articulation. So I think there's a lot for you to think about in terms of how, or if you still want to pursue a metal, how do these parts all connect to each other? So there's a lot to think about in terms of how one articulates this ghost. And then, of course, I think we'll have a further discussion on demolition when we come back as well. But I think, generally there's some openness to the idea of, expanding to the top and the back. It's a matter of what you see in the house and how much demolition. Okay, great.